Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Snoozy Scientist, where we wander gently through the mysteries of our world, one sleepy yawn at a time. Tonight, we are traveling back more than 66 million years ago to a time when the world was ruled by giants on land. Towering dinosaurs wandered through forests, thundered across plains, and drank from rivers that carved through ancient landscapes. But at the water's edge, something else was waiting. Deep in the sediment of old riverbeds, paleontologists have found a different kind of evidence. Bones belonging to massive dinosaurs that should have had no natural enemy, yet they carry wounds carved by pressure so immense the bone itself folded, punctures spaced with mathematical precision, armor crushed as if by a closing trap, shattered joints, cracked limbs, skulls bearing the marks of enormous jaws. These were not injuries from another dinosaur. Scientists noticed patterns in bite spacing that matched only one type of predator, a hunter that relied not on speed or claws, but on stillness, patience, and a bite force powerful enough to drag an animal beneath the surface in a single moment. Near the ancient shorelines, fossils appear in positions of panic and struggle. Mud ripple patterns show signs of sudden collapse. Bones gather in tangled clusters where the current carried victims downstream. The predator that killed them left almost no trace of itself. Its presence is written instead in the damage it caused. A secret hunter, one nearly invisible, except for the fear it carved into history. But what kind of creature could shape the fate of dinosaurs without ever stepping fully onto land? What hidden advantages allowed it to grow so large in a world already filled with megafauna? How did it bring down prey that stood several meters tall? And why did it leave only fragments and bite marks while vanishing from most of the fossil record? Tonight we drift deeper into the wetlands of deep time, where the greatest danger did not come from the forests or the plains. It waited in silence beneath the surface. But before we begin, if you enjoy these calm journeys through time and science, I would love it if you gently tapped like or subscribed. And if you would be so kind, tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight and what time it is there. So now take a deep breath, let your shoulders loosen, and together let us step softly into the world of the hidden giant that stalked the age of dinosaurs. To understand the world where this hidden hunter once waited, we have to return to a time when Earth moved with different rhythms. It was the late Cretaceous, a chapter in deep history when the land was warmer than it is today. The air held more moisture, and the seasons did not shift with the sharp edges we know. Climate changed in long breaths, rising and falling with the great cycles of ocean currents and drifting continents. The rivers that wound across this ancient landscape did not simply cut through the land, they sculpted it. They shaped the lives that gathered around them. Imagine a coastline where the sea pressed farther inland, creating wide deltas and tangled wetlands. These waters were warm and slow. They carried sediments from distant mountains, building new islands and shallow channels. During certain times of the year, monsoon rains fell for weeks, filling the rivers until they swelled past their beds. Floodplains blurred into marshes. The landscape breathed in water and exhaled fertile ground. When the rains faded and the dry season returned, the rivers shrank again and left behind pools where life clustered tightly together. These rivers were more than lines of water on a map. They were the great highways of the ancient world. They drew animals the way veins draw blood, carrying movement and energy across the land. Forests grew rich and dense along riverbanks. Giant conifers and flowering plants sent roots into the muddy soil. Ferns unfurled in the shade. Small insects flitted among the leaves. The edges of the rivers were alive with sound, rustling branches, and the distant calls of creatures we can only know through stone. Near these waters, Biodiversity flourished. Herds of herbivorous dinosaurs traveled together, pulled toward the rivers by instinct and necessity. They came not only to drink, but to feed on the vegetation that thrived where the soil was richest. Ankylosaurs, with their bony plates and heavy tails, marched slowly through the ferns. Hadrosaurs moved in long lines, their feet pressing patterns into the softened ground. Even the great sauropods passed through from time to time, bending the land beneath their weight. Predators followed these herds, not the hunter we have yet to meet, but other giants of the era. Tyrannosaurs stalked the dry plains and forest edges, moving with quiet calculation. Raptors watched from the shadows. The balance between hunter and prey was delicate, always shifting, always uncertain. Yet something different waited by the water, something older and patient. The rivers themselves were powerful forces. During the monsoon months, storms gathered over distant seas and swept inland. Rain fell in slow, heavy sheets. The sound of water became the heartbeat of the land. Riverbanks crumbled, old channels flooded, and then carved new paths as the currents shifted. Loose debris was carried downstream and settled where the waters calmed. Over time, these flows built the foundations for new ecosystems, feeding the soil with minerals and nutrients. Every creature in this world knew the importance of water. They could migrate to avoid droughts or storms, but they could never travel too far from the rivers. Water was life, and to survive they were drawn to its promise. At dusk, herds gathered near the shallows, stepping carefully through the mud and silt. Their reflections drifted across the surface. The smell of wet earth filled the air. Tiny creatures stirred in the reeds. The river was never truly silent. For the dinosaurs living in this world, approaching water was an act of trust. They watched the surface for ripples. They stepped slowly. They listened. Yet the rivers were deep and dark. The water hid more than it revealed. Beneath the reflected sky, the channels widened and fell away into unseen depths. Fallen trees sank to the bottom. Stones collected in quiet eddies. The currents carried secrets through the forest and into the sea. Life near the water was abundant, and because of that abundance, it was fragile. Herbivores drank with lowered heads. Young dinosaurs stayed close to their mothers. The promise of a safe moment was always challenged by the possibility of danger. Every footprint in the mud told a story of movement and need. Every ripple in the water suggested something stirring beneath. The coastlines were just as alive. Tides rose and fell across wide beaches. Salt water blended with fresh water in slow swirling tides. Estuaries formed, rich places where fish, crustaceans, and reptiles thrived. Birds wheeled overhead. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of life. From these coastal wetlands, storms could roll inland and reshape the land again. Nothing was still for long. In this world, survival meant walking the line between necessity and risk. Dinosaurs traveled long distances to reach the rivers. They crossed floodplains hardened by heat. They waited for the rains that revived the land. They drank from waters that had carried life for millions of years. Each approach to the shoreline carried the whisper of uncertainty. The rivers were the lifeblood of the late Cretaceous. They connected forests, plains, and coastlines. They sustained the plants that fed the herds. They offered refuge to young animals seeking safety and the cleansing flow of water. Yet they also held danger, hidden places where the currents ran deep and quiet, shadows where the boundaries of land and water blurred into one. This was the world that shaped the predator waiting just below the surface, a world where every living thing eventually found itself at the edge of the water. When we search for this ancient predator, we do not begin with the creature itself. Its bones are rarely found whole. Instead, we follow the fragments it left scattered across time. The rivers and coastlines of the late Cretaceous did more than shape the living world. They also shaped its memory. Over millions of years, they preserved hints of the violence that once took place along their edges. These hints do not speak with complete voices. They whisper through stone, through broken remains, through patterns that repeat just enough to be recognized. Scientists first learned to listen to these whispers in the bones of dinosaurs that once roamed along the riverbanks. Some of these bones are smooth and weathered by time. Others bear marks that do not match the familiar shapes of teeth from the giant land predators. The marks are deep and clean. They do not slice, they press inward, crushing instead of tearing. Paleontologists found holes pressed into limb bones, ribs, and even thick armor plates. Each puncture held a story of enormous pressure. They showed that something had gripped the bone with jaws strong enough to deform it. These bite marks are spaced in regular patterns. The distance between them reveals a jaw of remarkable width. The arcs of the impressions curve in ways that do not match the long slicing teeth of theropods. They do not resemble claws or talons. The shapes are blunt at the center, sharp along the edges, and angled inward as if the predator clamped down and twisted. These marks tell us about an ambush. They tell us about a moment when the water erupted, when bone and muscle were drawn suddenly downward. Some fossils even show crushed joints and mangled limbs that speak of torsion. The bone is not simply broken, it is compressed, bent, and twisted in ways that occur only when an immense force is applied in a single sudden motion. This kind of injury is seen today in animals taken by crocodiles in modern rivers. When they strike, the first bite does not simply hold the prey, it changes the shape of the bone beneath the skin. The fossil record preserves these moments of struggle, not in dramatic scenes frozen in time, but in the quiet language of damage. Along the riverbeds, certain bones tell another part of the story. Some show surface scratches that travel in parallel lines. These are the marks of dragging. They suggest that the prey was pulled from land into deeper water. The scratches are faint, sometimes barely visible, yet their presence is repeated across sites separated by distance and age. They tell us about movement. They trace a path from shallow edges to darker depths. In some places, the sediments hold clues that point toward the same conclusion. Bones are discovered not on dry floodplains, but in layers of old river mud and sand. The sediment settles in thin bands. It carries minerals that once flowed with the river. Fossils found in these layers often share the same story. Their final moments happened underwater. They were buried quickly by sediment that sifted over them grain by grain. The river protected the remains in a way the open land could not. Sometimes an entire fossil site seems to speak with one voice. Bones lie clustered together, not scattered by scavengers or carried far by the currents. They rest where the water slowed just enough to hold them. The positions of these bones are quiet hints of how the animals died. Limbs folded beneath bodies, heads turned downward. The shape of the land preserved the shape of the moment. Even when the predator itself is not present, the pattern remains. Compression fractures appear again and again. Bite marks match the size and arrangement of a giant reptile's teeth. The sediment tells us the water was involved. Drag marks whisper of a struggle that ended beneath the surface. It is as if the river saved every clue it could. The fossil record offers no single complete answer. It never delivers the full outline of the predator in perfect stone. Instead, it gives us many small fragments that together reveal a shadow. Each clue is a part of the story. Every bone with a crushed edge adds another piece. Every line scratched into stone adds direction. Every fossil buried in river sediment gives a place. Together, these clues form a trail that leads toward the hidden hunter. Scientists study these patterns with patience. They measure the spaces between teeth impressions. They map the fractures that bend and spiral through the bone. They compare ancient scars with the marks left by modern predators in similar environments. The connections are quiet but consistent. The same kinds of injuries appear in creatures taken near the water. Over time, the evidence becomes a kind of map. It shows where the predator lived, where it hunted, and where it pulled its prey beneath the surface. It shows that the violence came not from the open plains, but from the water's edge. This is how paleontologists begin to see the shape of something that almost never appears whole, not through the bones of the creature itself, but through the lives it touched. In these fragments, in the broken stories held in stone, the river speaks of the hunter that once waited in its depths. As the story of this hidden hunter slowly comes into view, the clues become more precise. The bones gathered from ancient riverbeds do more than speak of broken moments. They hold details that paleontologists read with patient eyes. These details are not loud or dramatic. They are quiet measurements, small curving lines, subtle shapes that repeat through time. In these patterns, the silhouette of the predator becomes sharper. One of the first signals lies in the arrangement of tooth marks. Every creature has a unique rhythm to the spacing of its teeth. Theropod dinosaurs, the great hunters of the land, carried long knife-like teeth set along a narrow jaw. Their bites left lines that cut and tore. The marks they left behind are often straight and thin, as though a row of blades had passed through flesh and bone. The impressions stretch in a single direction, with edges that scrape across the surface. The marks left by ancient crocodilians tell a different story. Their teeth were wide and conical. They did not slice, they pressed inward. When they closed their jaws, the spacing of each tooth left deep punctures that formed a broad arc. Scientists can measure the distance between these impressions. That spacing becomes a signature. It is like matching the curve of a key to the lock it once fit. Larger species have wider spacing, smaller ones leave a tighter pattern of indentations. These puncture marks usually appear in pairs, one from each jaw closing around the bone. Sometimes the curved shape of a bite wraps around the bone. Theropod bites rarely do this. Their jaws did not envelop the limb, they struck and released. Crocodilian jaws enclosed, held, and crushed. The difference can still be seen in the fossil record, millions of years after the last ripple settled over an ancient riverbank. It is as if the jaws left a calling card pressed into the surface of time. There are more differences to see. Theropods often left gouges that ran along the bone as they pulled back or repositioned for another strike. Their bites tore the surface. Crocodilians rarely left marks like that. Instead, their teeth sank deep and stayed in place. They pressed downward. They twisted. They broke the bone from pressure rather than slicing through it. The fractures reflect a moment of force delivered in a single direction. Paleontologists also look for the pattern of damage that follows. Crocodilian attacks can crush joints and bend bones. These fractures spiral in complex shapes that show the prey was not simply bitten, it was held and wrenched. The joints collapse inward. The bone bends before it breaks. This is the same kind of damage that can be found in modern animals pulled underwater by crocodiles today. To understand these ancient patterns, scientists turn their attention to the present. They study modern crocodilian attacks on large mammals, not because the animals are the same, but because the method is timeless. In the wild, crocodiles capture prey that drink at the shoreline or cross rivers. The moment they strike, their teeth grip around limbs, necks, or torsos. The force is not just a bite, it is a sudden clamp that can break bone and crush muscle. Researchers examine the marks left behind. They look at skulls of wildebeest dragged into African rivers, at bones from buffalo taken near floodplains, and even at the remains of large mammals found in swampy channels. The patterns repeat. The spacing between teeth matches the same curved lines seen in ancient fossils. The fractures show pressure delivered in a single powerful moment. Modern crocodiles often pull their prey into deeper water. The dragging motion leaves scratches and indentations that echo the stories told by fossils buried in Cretaceous river sediments. Scientists compare these modern examples with fossils from the ancient world. They see the same arcs of tooth spacing. They see the same deep impressions where teeth once pressed against bone. They see the same fractures where the limbs twisted under sudden force. These comparisons reveal a continuity across millions of years. The predator that hunted dinosaurs did not need a new method. The strategy was already perfected in distant ancestors. Paleontologists also examine the angles of teeth marks. Theropods often left symmetrical lines along the bone because they bit down from above or the side. Crocodilian marks curve because the jaws closed around the bone from both sides. This subtle shape, repeated again and again in different fossils, becomes a signature of the hunter waiting in the water. With every study, the difference becomes clearer. Theropod bites tear and scrape. Crocodilian bites crush and compress. One cuts, the other holds and twists. These patterns allow paleontologists to read fossils like stories. Each mark is a line in a chapter written by ancient predators. So the clues do not rely on finding the predator itself. They live in the remains of the prey. They show how the jaws moved. They show how the attack unfolded. They show a world where rivers hid powerful hunters that shaped the lives of the animals that came to drink. Long before the great dinosaurs walked across the land, the ancestors of the giant river hunters were already beginning their story. To see the full shape of this predator, we have to travel back much farther in time, past the warm wetlands of the late Cretaceous, past the reign of the powerful carnivorous theropods and the great herbivores that came to the water's edge. We journey into an older world where the land and sea were still sorting themselves into the forms we recognize today. In the Triassic period, more than 200 million years ago, Earth looked very different. The continents were joined together in one vast landmass called Pangaea. The seasons were harsh and unpredictable. Great deserts stretched across the center of the continent. The monsoon rains that once nourished river ecosystems came and went in long patterns, not predictable cycles. Early reptiles struggled through an environment that could change with little warning. Yet, even in these shifting lands, the ancestors of crocodiles found a way to endure. These ancient creatures did not look exactly like the crocodiles we know. Some were small and slender, moving across land rather than living in water. Others were armored with plates of bone set beneath their skin. Some stood taller and ran on long legs. They appeared in many forms, as if evolution experimented again and again with a shape that could survive extremes. Their ancestors belonged to a larger group of reptiles that also gave rise to dinosaurs and birds. The tree of life was still forming its branches, and crocodilian lineage followed its own quiet path. One reason these early crocodile relatives succeeded was their mastery of adaptation. Their bodies were built for strength and efficiency. Their bones were reinforced with natural armor called osteoderms. This armor protected their backs and sides, allowing them to face larger predators without being easily overwhelmed. Even the earliest forms had powerful jaws. They did not bite like the giant hunters that came later, but they still held enough force to take down small prey or crack open tough shells. Another advantage was their ability to hunt through ambush. While other animals relied on speed or sharp claws, early crocodilians learned the art of stillness. In a world filled with large predators, being unnoticed became a kind of power. They waited near the edges of lakes and streams. When a small animal came near to drink, the ancestor of a crocodile would strike with surprising speed. The ancient strategy that once worked on small prey would later grow into a method capable of toppling giants. These early crocodile relatives also had an ability that helped them through the great extinction events that shaped life on Earth. When the Triassic period ended, massive volcanic eruptions, climate changes, and shifting oceans caused many species to disappear. Dinosaurs survived. So did the ancestors of crocodiles. They could tolerate changing temperatures. They could survive on little food for long stretches of time. Their metabolism worked slowly and efficiently, allowing them to endure where others fell. This pattern would repeat again. When the world changed at the end of the Triassic, crocodile ancestors survived. When other predators rose and fell, they remained. They adapted to new rivers, new climates, and new prey. Their lineage crossed the boundary between entire geological eras. They became residents of the Earth's shifting landscapes rather than victims of them. Over millions of years, their bodies changed. Some grew longer and heavier. Their skulls widened to hold larger muscles, increasing their bite strength. Their limbs flattened and rotated to better swim through water. Their lungs adapted to hold oxygen for longer periods, allowing them to wait beneath the surface without moving. Evolution did not push crocodilians into many separate forms the way it did with dinosaurs. Instead, it perfected a single design: strong jaws, heavy armor, a patient heartbeat. The power of this design only became more apparent as rivers and coastlines spread across the land. When the first dinosaurs appeared, the ancestors of crocodiles had already learned the secrets of survival. They had armor where it mattered. They had jaws that could crush bone or hold prey without slipping. They had the instinct to remain still for hours if needed. They did not chase. They waited for the world to come to them. This way of life helped them endure more than one extinction. Long after many of the early reptiles disappeared, crocodile relatives continued to thrive. Through the Jurassic and into the Cretaceous, they refined their bodies and strategies. When new predators appeared, they did not need to change quickly. Their strength was not running or speed, it was patience. They lived through droughts and floods. They watched from the water's edge. They found safety in the places where land and water meet. By the time the age of giant dinosaurs arrived, the ancestors of crocodiles had already tested and strengthened every advantage they would need. They were shaped by ancient climates and survival in harsh environments. They were armored against danger and capable of delivering crushing bites. They were ambush hunters long before the first towering giants walked the earth. This long history became the foundation for the predator that would one day wait beneath the rivers of the Cretaceous, ready to strike when the moment was right. By the time the age of dinosaurs reached its height, the long lineage of crocodilians had already survived ancient upheavals and shifting continents. They carried with them the patience of their ancestors, the armor that once protected them from the dangers of the Triassic, and the steady instincts shaped by countless generations. Now the earth was changing once again, but this time the changes opened a door rather than closing one. Warmth spread across the planet in a long and gentle arc. The late Cretaceous climate offered conditions that favored growth on an extraordinary scale. Oceans moved along shorelines and seeped deep into the continents. Tropical air flowed into the interior lands. Rain fell in repeating cycles that fed broad rivers and expanding wetlands. These were places rich with life. Fish crowded the channels. Turtles drifted through the shallows. Dinosaur herds crossed the water again and again. In the warm floodplains and coastal basins, food was never far from the hunter that waited quietly nearby. Large bodies need more than space. They need energy. The power of these ancient river systems supported an abundance that few earlier ages had known. The earth itself was generous. Forests grew dense along riverbanks. Huge ferns and flowering plants stretched toward the light. As vegetation flourished, So did the animals that relied on it. Every layer of life fed the next. With every generation, the balance shifted slightly in favor of the creatures that could make the most of it. Crocodilians did not simply survive in this landscape, they grew. They reached lengths that rival the length of small boats. Some species grew even larger. Fossils and impressions show crocodilian relatives that measured longer than a grown human could walk in one stride. Teeth, as long as a person's hand, once lined jaws that opened wide enough to hold entire limbs. The rivers and deltas of the Cretaceous hosted more than one kind of giant. There were species that took to deeper waters, species that stalked coastal beaches, and others that stayed near the branches of rivers. Scientists know this because the bones tell the story with quiet precision. Partial skulls reveal the width of the jaw. The length of a tooth speaks of the space it filled. Even the thickness of vertebrae suggests how heavy the body must have been. In some places, only fragments of these giants remain, yet those fragments hint at enormous creatures that once slid through ancient rivers as confidently as modern crocodiles do today. Among these prehistoric relatives were species that dwarfed the crocodiles of the present. Some grew longer than 10 meters, others carried skulls shaped for gripping large prey rather than snapping at smaller fish. Each species fit into its own place in the ecosystem, taking advantage of the water, the climate, and the abundance of prey. In this way, the rivers became stages for a quiet arms race between predator and environment. As the rivers widened and food increased, the crocodilians grew larger, stronger, and more capable of taking down even the mightiest herbivores that came to drink. Their bodies changed to match this growing size. Their jaws thickened to hold heavier muscles. Their skeletons supported weight that earlier species could never have managed. Some species lived mostly in salt water. Others preferred fresh rivers. Still others moved between the two. This ability to flourish in different environments became another advantage, allowing crocodilians to claim territories that stretched across continents. Modern saltwater crocodiles offer a window into this ancient world. They are among the largest living reptiles today, reaching lengths greater than the height of a house and weights that rival small cars. They thrive in warm coastal regions and river estuaries where fish, mammals, and birds gather. Their behavior reflects strategies that have existed for millions of years. They wait in shallow water where the current hides their form. They strike with jaws that clamp shut with enough force to crush bone. The ancient giants likely used similar tactics, only on a far larger scale. Yet, the prehistoric world gave these animals more room to grow. Temperatures were warmer across much of the planet. Prey was more abundant. Rivers spread like veins across every continent. Climate and geography worked together to allow these crocodilians to reach sizes that their modern descendants rarely achieve. It was not one single cause. It was a combination of environment, prey, and long evolutionary history. The Earth itself encouraged their rise. Fossils from South America and Africa show evidence of multiple species that continued to push the limits of size. Some skulls contain hollow areas that once held massive jaw muscles. Others show heavy bone ridges that may have supported sensory organs used to detect movement in the water. The body of the giant crocodilian was more than a predator's tool. It was a reflection of the world that built it. In the rivers and coastal plains of the Cretaceous, crocodilians grew into giants not because they had to, but because the earth allowed them to. Warmth, water, and abundance formed the foundation of their rise. Their ancient ancestors had waited for opportunity. Now that opportunity had arrived. Giant crocodilians claimed the rivers of the ancient world and shaped the lives of the creatures that entered their domain. By the time giant crocodilians ruled the rivers of the late Cretaceous, their bodies had become masterpieces of ancient engineering. Every bone, every muscle, and every hidden organ reflected millions of years of slow, deliberate change. These animals were not merely large, they were refined. They carried inside their bodies the wisdom of ancestors that survived one violent era after another. To understand why they became such powerful hunters, we must look closely at the shape of their bodies and the silent strength that lay beneath the surface. Their skulls held the first clue. The shape of a crocodilian skull is unlike any other predator in prehistory. It narrows at the snout and widens toward the jaw hinge, forming a wedge that could cut through water without resistance. This shape was not just a matter of appearance, it was a perfect balance between strength and motion, muscle attached to deep ridges on the skull. Each ridge held thick fibers that pulled the jaw closed with astonishing force. Even in fossil form, the places where these muscles once anchored tell the story of an animal that could hold its prey with unshakable grip. The bite mechanics of these ancient species were more than simple strength. When they attacked, the force came from the entire head and neck working together. Modern crocodiles use a similar technique, but the prehistoric giants took it to an even greater level. Their jaws worked like a set of living traps. The upper jaw pressed downward, while the lower jaw rose upward. Each tooth fit into its place, interlocking with the opposite row. When they closed their mouths, the entire skull acted as one massive lever. The pressure traveled along the length of the jaw, through the hinge, and into the bones of the neck. Even large animals stood little chance of pulling free. Inside the skull, the teeth were shaped like thick cones. They were not meant for slicing, they were meant for crushing. Every tooth could concentrate pressure into a single point. When the jaws closed, the teeth pressed through muscle and bone, holding prey without slipping. Fossils show that some species had teeth sized like stakes, each one built for gripping and breaking rather than cutting. It was a design that did not depend on speed, it depended on certainty. Along the body, the skeletal structure carried this same sense of power. The spine was reinforced, the ribs were thick and slightly curved, forming a heavy frame that protected vital organs. Beneath the skin lay armor plates called osteoderms. These plates were made of bone and arranged in overlapping patterns. Each osteoderm had a raised surface, ridged and textured. They locked together like the scales of ancient shields. This armor did more than protect against the claws and teeth of other predators. It acted as a natural weight that helped the crocodile sink beneath the water's surface. These osteoderms also changed how their bodies handled force. When a prehistoric crocodilian twisted in the water, the plates absorbed and distributed the stress. The spine did not have to bear every strain. The armor became part of the skeleton itself, a flexible shell that allowed the animal to move fluidly without sacrificing protection. This armor, combined with powerful muscle, made the crocodile stronger not just in attack, but in survival. Muscle attachment points across the shoulders and tail reveal another advantage. The tail was long and heavy, shaped for swimming. Strong tendons and muscle bands lined the spine. This tail could move with surprising strength in a single motion. With one powerful sweep, the crocodile could push itself forward. It could rise from the water or drag its prey deeper. The whole body worked in harmony, from the skull to the tail. Every movement carried purpose. Their senses were just as specialized. Near the snout, tiny pits lined the skin. These were sensory organs tuned to vibrations. Modern crocodiles use them to detect ripples in the water. They can feel even the smallest movement, sensing where animals are without seeing them. Ancient species likely had these same pits, honed by time and necessity. They let the predator become part of the river itself. The water whispered, and the crocodile listened. These sensory pits offered more than awareness. They allowed the crocodile to remain still while knowing exactly when to strike. They could detect disturbances in the current and the delicate pulse of movement. This sense stretched beyond the surface. It reached into the depths of the water and traveled across the river floor. It told the crocodile when prey approached, when danger was nearby, and when the perfect moment arrived. Inside their bodies, lungs rested along the spine. These lungs were long and efficient, holding air for extended periods. When submerged, the crocodile could hold its breath and wait. The water hid its form. Its armor and muscles held it steady. Its sensory organs read the world in silence. Everything about its anatomy worked toward a single purpose: to strike only once, and to strike with certainty. The prehistoric giant crocodilians were not simply large versions of their ancestors. They were the result of evolution refining advantages across millions of years. Their skulls became more powerful. Their teeth became better suited for gripping. Their armor became thicker and more flexible. Their senses became more refined. Their bodies became part of the environments that shaped them. In the quiet depths of ancient rivers, these super predators moved with slow patience. Their anatomy held the strength of storms and the calmness of water. Every bone and muscle reflected the long history that brought them to life. To understand the ancient crocodilian as a hunter, we must look closely at the power it carried within its jaws. The skull may tell us about shape and structure. The armor may speak of protection and endurance. But it is the bite that stands at the center of its strength. The jaws of these prehistoric giants were not simply tools for feeding. They were instruments of force that could change the fate of even the most powerful animals that walked along the water's edge. Through careful study of fossil remains and comparison with modern crocodilians, scientists have been able to estimate the force these ancient jaws could deliver. The numbers are astonishing. A crocodile today can bite with a force many times greater than the strongest jaws of carnivorous mammals. The extinct giants of the Cretaceous may have reached jaw forces surpassing the strength of even large predators on land. Some estimates suggest pressures strong enough to crush bone in a single movement. These jaws were like living vices. They closed with a force that traveled through the skull and neck, supported by thick muscles that ran across the shoulders. The way these jaws worked tells us even more about the predator that wielded them. Instead of long slicing teeth, these ancient crocodiles carried conical ones that focused force into a single point. When the jaws closed, the teeth did not cut. They pressed inward. The bone beneath did not simply break at the surface. It bent and deformed. It cracked under pressure. The difference between slicing and crushing may seem small at first, but in the world of predators, it changes everything. When a dinosaur fell prey to a theropod, the bite of the attacker ripped flesh and muscle. The teeth acted like knives, tearing and opening wounds. For a crocodile, the method was different. Its jaws clamped and held. The teeth did not slice through skin, they drove into it. The bite created fractures that traveled deep into the bone. The prey could not simply pull away. It was held in place by force alone. The skull of the crocodile became the anchor for this moment. The muscles did not tire quickly. They were built for holding, just as the body was built for patience. Scientists have studied modern crocodiles to understand how this works in real hunting scenarios. When a crocodile takes a large animal, it does not bite to kill immediately. It bites to hold and to control. The power of the bite pins the prey. It prevents escape. The ancient giants likely used similar techniques. The first strike was not the end. It was the beginning of a struggle in which the prey needed to breathe and move, while the crocodile only needed to wait. This bite force becomes even more meaningful when we remember the world around these ancient rivers. Herds of dinosaurs visited the water to drink or feed on vegetation. Some were small, light-footed creatures that moved with quick steps. Others were large, heavy animals that towered over the landscape. The bite force of the crocodile did not discriminate. It was capable of stopping prey much larger than itself. Bone could be crushed regardless of size. One bite was enough to alter balance and movement. A limb trapped in the jaws of the crocodile became a point of control. Even dinosaurs, with thick armor and heavy bodies, were not completely safe. Ankylosaurs carried plates along their backs. Hadrosaurs moved in groups for protection. Yet none of these defenses were perfect when the attack came from the water. The crocodile did not need to chase its prey for long distances. It only needed to get close enough to strike. Its jaws made the difference between escape and capture. The way the jaw force was applied changed depending on the moment. A swift upward motion could grip the leg of a passing animal. A sudden twist could break bone. The crocodile's skull and teeth worked together to hold and to crush. In water, the force of the current helped. The crocodile did not fight the river. It used its natural movement as part of the attack. When a dinosaur struggled to escape, it pulled against the water and the grip of the jaws. The resistance only added to the damage. Modern observations offer more insight. Crocodiles today sometimes take down prey many times their size. They do it not through speed, but through the quiet certainty of their bite. They clamp onto a limb or a neck and let the strength of the jaws do the work. Scientists believe the ancient giants behaved in similar ways. Their bite force made them capable of capturing young dinosaurs, injured adults, or animals caught off guard. There were species most at risk. Young herbivores, still learning to navigate the world, often traveled near the water's edge. Smaller dinosaurs that fed on plants or insects also came close to drink. Even predators needed the river. The water became a place where strength was tested. In those moments, the bite of the crocodile mattered more than speed or claws. It was the deciding factor. The power of the bite is a key to understanding why these ancient crocodiles became such successful hunters. Their jaws held enough force to crush bone rather than slice through it. They matched their environment and prey in perfect balance. The rivers of the Cretaceous were their world, and within that world, the bite gave them control over life and death. To understand the giant crocodiles of the ancient world, we have to imagine a predator that rarely rushed, rarely wasted energy, and rarely revealed itself until the final moment. These animals did not rely on speed over long distances. They did not chase across open plains or through tangled forests. Their power rested in stillness and timing. The river gave them a way to disappear, and patience became their most reliable strategy. In the warm waters of the late Cretaceous, these crocodiles waded along the river's edge or just beneath the surface. They were almost completely silent. Only their eyes rose above the water, reflecting the world like small islands of darkness. Just below, their bodies rested against the gentle currents. Their tails moved with tiny adjustments, allowing them to hold their place without drifting. They did not need to move quickly, they only needed to watch. Ambush was their most trusted method. Many predators on land rely on the surprise of speed, bursting from hiding with sudden force. The ancient crocodile hunted in a different way. The river itself became its cover. It blended into the environment so completely that prey could walk within a few steps without noticing the danger. A dinosaur drinking from the river saw only the calm surface. It heard only the gentle rush of water and leaves in the wind. The crocodile remained part of that quiet scenery. Patience was the heart of its strategy. The giant crocodile could wait for hours in a single position. It needed little movement to breathe, little effort to stay hidden. Every second was a simple investment. It did not cost energy to watch. It did not cost strength to wait. The crocodile waited for the perfect moment when its prey lowered its head, or stepped into the shallows, or crossed a narrow channel of water. Unlike predators on land, the crocodile did not have to chase. It only had to let life come closer. When that moment arrived, the attack was sudden. The transition from stillness to movement took only a breath. The crocodile burst forward from the water with a single sweep of its tail. The jaws opened and closed in one motion. There was no warning. The strength of the bite did what thousands of years of evolution had shaped it to do. A limb or neck became trapped between rows of crushing teeth. The power traveled through bone and muscle. Even a large dinosaur struggled against the sudden force. These attacks were not always the same. Some happened when dinosaurs approached the river to drink. Others happened as they crossed from one bank to the other. In the wetlands and marshes, where water and land mingled together, the crocodile found endless opportunities. Young dinosaurs walked near the edges. Herds followed familiar paths. The crocodile watched from just beneath the surface, the world above reflected in a thin veil of water. The crocodile understood the landscape as well as any creature of that time. It used the depth of the river to its advantage. It positioned itself near channels where the water dropped sharply into deeper pockets. A dinosaur stepping into the shallows might not know that a few steps farther the river floor fell away. The crocodile did know. It chose the places where the river's shape kept prey from gaining their footing once the attack began. After the initial bite, the struggle continued. The crocodile pulled its prey into deeper water. Its body twisted with powerful motions. The tail helped steer the direction. Water added resistance to every movement the prey made. It became harder to stand, harder to resist. The crocodile's heavy body used the river like a tool. The deeper the prey was drawn, the less control it had. Some animals slipped beneath the surface quickly. Others fought for a moment before losing balance and sinking. The dragging of prey was not done in haste. The crocodile did not need to rush. Once the jaws held their grip, the outcome was shaped by the river and the strength of the predator. The crocodile often pulled its victim into a deep channel where the water flowed slowly. Here, the prey's movement became quiet. The struggle reached its end not through speed or violence, but through control and time. Modern crocodiles show a similar behavior. They take advantage of riverbanks and shallow water crossings. They strike from below and use the water to hold their prey. Ancient crocodiles operated on the same principles, although their size allowed them to target animals much larger than themselves. Their bodies were shaped for this method of hunting. Their jaws held strong. Their muscles powered every movement. Their senses told them when the moment arrived. In the quiet waters of the ancient world, giant crocodiles hunted with the river at their side. Their attacks relied not on chasing but on waiting, not on long pursuit but on one perfect moment. Their strength and patience shaped their lives and the lives of the animals that approached the water, step by careful step. If the jaws of the ancient crocodile were the instruments of its power, then the water itself was the world in which that power became complete. The rivers and wetlands of the late Cretaceous did more than offer a hunting ground. They gave these giants an advantage that no land predator could match. The crocodile did not simply live in water, it used water as an extension of its own body. One of the quiet strengths of these prehistoric hunters was their mastery of buoyancy. Their bodies were built in a way that allowed them to float or sink with very little effort. Inside, their lungs stretched along the spine like long, narrow chambers. When filled with air, they lifted the crocodile toward the surface. When emptied, they pulled the animal deeper. This control did not require frantic movement. The crocodile did not need to swim in circles or splash. A single breath changed its entire position in the water. The osteoderms in their back also played a role. These thick plates of bone added weight to the top of the body, helping keep the crocodile level when it drifted just below the surface. Heavy armor that once protected them from ancient threats now balanced their bodies in the water. This subtle design made them appear almost weightless. They glided without sinking too deep or rising too high. They became part of the river itself. Their muscles completed the picture. Unlike land predators that depend on bursts of speed, the ancient crocodile built its hunting style around slow, deliberate movement. Each muscle was thick and efficient. Strong fibers ran along the tail, down the spine, and across the shoulders. These muscles did not tire quickly. They pushed against the water with steady force. A single movement carried the crocodile forward without sound or splash. Even when they moved quickly for the final strike, very little energy was lost. The water seemed to support their strength. There is a quiet patience in underwater hunting that the crocodile understood well. To stay hidden for long periods, the animal needed more than stillness. It needed to breathe in a way that did not interrupt the silence. Ancient crocodilians could hold their breath for long stretches of time. Their lungs stored oxygen with great efficiency. Blood flowed through their bodies at a slow, steady pace, conserving energy. The heart pumped just enough to keep the muscles ready. While other animals needed to surface often, the crocodile stayed where it wanted to be. With this ability, it could remain submerged while watching the world above. Only its nostrils broke the surface when it needed air. These tiny openings were placed high on the snout so the rest of the body could stay hidden below. Even when a crocodile did breathe, it did so with the quietest gesture. It was almost impossible to detect from the shoreline. In the water, every movement carried meaning. The crocodile did not have to reveal its presence. The surface of the river became a mirror. Trees and sky reflected across it. From above, the broad body blended into the darker colors of submerged plants. Sunlight on the water created shifting patterns of light and shadow. These patterns broke the outline of the predator. Even a careful eye could easily mistake the crocodile for another part of the riverbed. This camouflage was not just visual. The crocodile was quiet. It avoided splashing and sudden motions. The sensory pits along its snout allowed it to read the water's vibrations as it drifted. Every ripple told a story. A fish swimming nearby, an animal stepping into the shallows. The river spoke in small movements. The crocodile listened. The underwater world also gave the crocodile freedom that land hunters did not have. The water supported its weight, making it easier to move with almost no effort. It did not have to hold itself upright. It did not have to run or climb. Its body rested in a space where gravity behaved differently. This advantage allowed it to save strength for the moment it needed most. When it lunged for its prey, the crocodile used the power of both its muscles and the force of the water around it. Even the shadows beneath the surface became part of the crocodile's hunting technique. The deeper channels offered darkness where the predator could disappear completely. It could approach from below, where light did not penetrate. The prey above saw only the reflection of the sky. The crocodile rose through the water like a sudden change in the current. It struck with the same jaws that could crush bone, armed with the full advantage of its underwater world. This relationship between body and environment did not happen by accident. It was the result of the long history of survival that shaped crocodilian evolution. The water did not simply hide the predator, it made the predator stronger. The buoyancy allowed it to wait without tiring. The muscle allowed it to move without alerting its prey. The lungs held enough oxygen to keep it submerged through the long moments of silence. The camouflage from above made the boundary between predator and river almost invisible. In those ancient rivers, the crocodile was not a creature separate from the water. It was part of the flow and the depth and the stillness. The underwater advantage made every other part of its body more effective. When the moment of the hunt came, the crocodile rose from a world that belonged entirely to its design. The great rivers of the Cretaceous did more than carve valleys and wetlands across the land. They shaped the rhythm of life for every creature that lived nearby. Even the largest dinosaurs, towering over the earth with their strength and size, were bound to the water. These waters were the source of survival. They nourished the plants, fed the soil, and gave life to every herd that wandered across the ancient plains. Herbivorous dinosaurs were especially tied to the rivers. Their massive bodies needed enormous amounts of food and water. Dry grasslands could not always supply enough moisture. Forest leaves could only sustain them for so long. Eventually, every herd made the slow journey back to the water. They followed ancient routes carved into the land by generations of animals before them. These paths carried the weight of tradition and necessity. The dinosaurs had no choice. Water was life, and the rivers were the only place where it could be found in abundance. Each approach to the river became a ritual of caution and instinct. The herd moved in small steps, bodies shifting as they drew nearer. Adult hadrosaurs and ceratopsians gathered together in protective clusters. Ankylosaurs, with their heavy armor, took positions near the edges. Even the mighty sauropods, with necks that rose high into the sky, paused before stepping into the shallows. They understood the water's importance. They also sensed its uncertainty. For young dinosaurs, the danger was even greater. Juveniles were smaller and less experienced. Their steps were lighter, and their reactions less tested by the world. They relied on the presence of adults for safety. Yet the instinct that drew them to water also placed them at risk. Many fossil sites show evidence of young herbivores near riverbeds. Their bones tell stories of sudden danger, where the last steps they took were toward the promise of water. The river did not offer clear protection. Its banks shifted with the seasons. During the rainy months, the water swelled and spread into the floodplains. When the dry season returned, the rivers shrank and exposed deep channels. These changing landscapes created crossings that were never the same from one year to the next. The crocodiles knew this. They knew where the river became shallow enough for a dinosaur to step through. They knew where the deeper waters waited. As herds gathered at the banks, every movement became a lesson in vulnerability. The younger dinosaurs pressed close to their families. They drank quickly and looked up often. The adults scanned the water, watching for ripples or changes in the surface. The river was a place where safety and danger met. Even when the herd approached together, their numbers were not always enough to provide protection. River crossings were some of the most dangerous moments. When dinosaurs needed to move from one side of the water to the other, they stepped into a world that was not their own. Land predators rarely chased them into the water. But here, in this boundary between environments, the crocodile waited. It knew that animals crossing the river were vulnerable. They were moving, not watching. Their feet slid on the soft riverbed. Their balance shifted with each step. The crocodile used this moment to strike. It did not need to rush. The herd could not turn quickly. The young dinosaurs struggled to stay close to their parents. The water slowed their movements and made every step an effort. The crocodile watched for separation, for hesitation, for the second when one dinosaur would fall behind. It was often enough. Scientists have discovered fossils that suggest entire groups of dinosaurs were attacked during these crossings. Bones of multiple animals have been found in river sediments, buried together by the same flow of water. Some show bite marks and fractures that match the jaws of ancient crocodiles. The river became a silent record of the danger that unfolded. Even when the attack did not come, the river crossings left their mark. The footprints left along the banks tell stories of hesitation. The deeper impressions reveal where the ground was soft and uncertain. The paths show where herds gathered and where they stopped. Across millions of years, these patterns remain in stone. The water's edge also became a place for predators to watch. Not all dangers came from the river. Raptors sometimes lingered in the forest shadows. Large theropods waited on the plains. But the crocodile had an advantage that no other predator shared. It was already hidden. Its body blended into the water. Its breath barely broke the surface. It needed no pursuit. For the dinosaurs that lived in this world, the river was both provider and threat. It gave them life and drew them back again and again. It offered the water they needed to survive and the fresh plants that grew along its margins. Yet each step toward the river brought the possibility of being taken. The advantage always belonged to the hunter that knew how to wait. The water's edge was not just a place in the world. It was a moment in time when the balance between safety and danger shifted with every ripple on the surface. The ancient rivers did more than sustain life. They preserved its stories in stone. The fossils that lie beneath layers of rock are not just fragments of bone. They are echoes of moments when predator and prey met at the water's edge. These encounters were rarely quiet. They left traces that scientists still uncover today, not as clear scenes frozen in time, but as signs that speak gently of struggle and survival. One of the most striking pieces of evidence comes from bones that bear unmistakable marks. Some show deep paired punctures where powerful jaws once closed around them. These punctures are rounded and close together. They match the curved pattern of teeth from ancient crocodilians. The spacing reveals the size of the predator. The shape shows how the jaws clamped and held. Sometimes the bone is cleanly punctured in two places. Sometimes the marks are uneven, pressed into the surface at slight angles. These small variations hint at movement. They speak of a moment when the dinosaur tried to pull away and the predator tightened its grip. The bones tell us something about the size of the animals involved. Juvenile dinosaurs often show smaller punctures. Larger herbivores carry broader impressions that reflect the bite of giant species. These marks are preserved long after the animals themselves are gone. They form patterns that paleontologists study carefully. The angles and spacing are like signatures left behind by the ancient hunter. They reveal not just that the predator struck, but how it did so. Some fossils show more than a single bite. They carry scratches that travel across the surface. These lines appear in pairs or clusters. They suggest that the predator moved its teeth while holding the prey. The scratches speak of motion and force. They show how the crocodile dragged its victim or repositioned its jaws. The bone, once alive and flexible, became a canvas that captured every moment of contact. Even after the dinosaur's flesh decayed, these markings remained. These bite marks are not the only evidence of encounters. In certain places along ancient riverbeds, scientists have discovered fossils from several species in a single site. Bones of dinosaurs lie near the remains of crocodilians. They share the same sediment layer, deposited by the same flow of water. These fossil sites tell stories of complex ecosystems. They show that many animals lived, fed, and hunted in the same places. Sometimes the dinosaurs were not alone when they approached the water. Other creatures gathered nearby. The river supported an entire community. The arrangement of bones in these sites reveals more than presence. It reveals interaction. Sometimes the bones lie in patterns that suggest movement and struggle. Large skeletons are found near smaller ones. The positioning hints that predators and prey move together in a moment of capture. Some sites contain clusters of remains that show a mix of species. This suggests that multiple animals died or were buried in a shared event. The river, always shifting and changing, covered these moments in layers of sediment. Scientists also study the sediments themselves. Sand and mud can preserve the shape of footprints, drag marks, or impressions from bodies that rested against the riverbed. These are called trace fossils. In rare cases, they capture scenes of predator and prey at the moment of contact. A footprint might show the struggle of a dinosaur trying to pull free. A drag mark might reveal where the crocodile pulled its victim toward deeper water. These impressions are subtle. They are not dramatic paintings of the past. They are quiet shadows of what once occurred. In one remarkable example, paleontologists found a series of paired depressions leading from the riverbank into deeper sediment. The shapes of these marks match the dragging motion of a heavy animal being pulled along the ground. The depressions grow deeper as they move toward the water. They show where the struggle became stronger. The bones of the dinosaur were found farther down beneath the sediment, preserved beneath layers of mud that once flowed across the river's floor. Another rare case revealed the remains of a hadrosaur with puncture marks along its ribs. The spacing and depth matched the teeth of a large crocodilian. Near the skeleton, scientists found the hardened remains of ancient river channels. The position of the bones suggested that the dinosaur had been attacked near the water and dragged into the river before being buried by sediment. The scene was not complete. Nature rarely preserves a perfect story. Yet every mark combined to reveal the shape of what once happened. These fossils remind us that encounters between predators and dinosaurs were not isolated events. They were part of a larger world where rivers were shared by many species. The bones record the presence of danger in the water. The sediments preserve the motion of the struggle. The trace fossils capture small details that time could not erase. Together, they form a quiet record of the moments when ancient crocodilians and dinosaurs met. The rivers of the Cretaceous held both life and risk. The bones and sediments that survive today are the soft echoes of those ancient encounters. They tell of a world where the water shaped not just the land, but the fate of the creatures that came to drink. When we look at the rivers of the world today, we can still see quiet reflections of the ancient hunters that once waded in the waters of the Cretaceous. Their bones sleep beneath stone, and their names have faded with time, but their strategy remains in the bodies and behaviors of the crocodiles that live now. To understand what those prehistoric giants were capable of, we only need to observe the predators that glide along the coasts and rivers of the present. They reveal a connection that stretches across nearly 200 million years, carried forward through instinct and design. One of the clearest mirrors is the saltwater crocodile. It lives in warm coastal regions, river mouths, and marshes. These places resemble the ancient wetlands that once sheltered the giant crocodilians. The saltwater crocodile moves with the same patient confidence. It glides silently through the water. Its body barely rises above the surface. Only its eyes reveal that it is watching. This predator does not rush. It waits. It positions itself in places where animals must come to drink or cross the river. The saltwater crocodile may lie motionless for hours. It studies the water. It senses vibrations. It listens to every disturbance. Modern scientists have watched it approach prey not with frantic movement, but with small adjustments of its tail and body. It closes distance without sound or splash. It does not need to swim fast. It only needs to hold its breath and drift. When the moment comes, the animal strikes with force that echoes ancient power. The jaws of the saltwater crocodile close with one of the strongest bites in the modern world. The attack is sudden and final. The crocodile pulls its prey into the water, just as the prehistoric giants once did. It uses the weight of its body and the resistance of water to hold the struggling animal. The prey loses balance and footing. What follows is a struggle in the depths, shaped by patience and power. In Africa, the Nile crocodile follows the same pattern. Along the banks of wide rivers and deep channels, these predators wait for herds of buffalo and antelope. These mammals travel in groups, just as dinosaurs once did. They approach the river because they have no choice. They need water to survive. The crocodile watches for the smallest hesitation or separation in the herd. It does not choose the largest animal. It chooses the one that steps closest or lowers its head for a moment too long. The hunting strategy has not changed. The crocodile explodes from the water in a single burst. The jaws close around a leg, a neck, or the soft part of the belly. The animal does not need to wrestle for long. It uses the river to overwhelm its prey. Researchers have observed Nile crocodiles pulling entire buffalo from the riverbank into deeper channels. These are animals that weigh far more than the crocodile itself. The success comes not from chasing or overpowering, but from using the environment as a weapon. This behavior is not unique to one species or one place. It is shared across many crocodile populations around the world. Whether they are hunting fish, birds, or large mammals, the approach is the same: stillness, silence, patience, sudden certainty. Scientists believe this pattern is ancient. It existed long before humans walked the earth, long before the first dinosaurs appeared, long before continents separated into the shapes we know. The reason these behaviors have barely changed in nearly 200 million years is simple. They worked. The crocodilian body was perfected early in its evolution: strong jaws, powerful tail, heavy armor that doubled as ballast in water, sharp senses that read movement in the currents, an energy-efficient metabolism that allowed long periods of rest. No other predator used water in this way. No other animal hunted from below with such precision. Evolution rarely keeps something the same unless change would offer no advantage. Crocodilians did not need to become faster or more complex. They already fit their world with remarkable success. Over time, their bodies grew larger or smaller depending on climate and prey. Their skulls shifted in size and shape. Their armor thickened or became less pronounced. But the spirit of their strategy remained untouched. Modern crocodiles show us how little time can alter a perfect design. They take down animals much larger than themselves. They wait at river crossings. They strike from below. They drag prey into deeper water. They use the environment to their advantage. These are the same methods that ancient crocodilians used when dinosaurs approached the water's edge. When we watch a saltwater crocodile move through the marshes of Australia, or the Nile crocodile slide beneath the surface of an African river, we are watching 200 million years of history unfold in a single motion. We see the same calm patience that shaped the predators of the Cretaceous. we see the same attack that once changed the fate of dinosaurs. And in that moment, the present and the ancient world feel bound together by the quiet survival of an idea. The rivers of the Cretaceous were not straight lines carved into the land. They wandered like living things, curving through forests and plains in long arcs. They shifted with the seasons, pulling soil from one place and laying it down in another. These waters created a world where change was constant, where the edges of the river were always new. In this world, the wetlands spread far across the landscape, becoming the heart of life for countless animals. During the rainy seasons, clouds gathered over distant seas and drifted inland. When the rain began, it did not fall gently. Sheets of water rolled across the land. The rivers swelled and spilled over their banks. Floodplains became lakes. Channels deepened and widened. What had once been dry ground turned into marshes. Vegetation grew thick along the edges. Trees rose from soft soil, their roots reaching into the water for support. The flooding transformed everything. Animals moved with the water. Herds of dinosaurs wandered to higher ground. Smaller creatures climbed into the branches of trees or retreated into burrows. The crocodilians did not leave. They welcomed the floodwaters. To them, the rising water was a gift. It brought new passageways through the landscape. It carried prey closer to where they waited. It opened deeper pools and shaded channels where they could remain hidden. When the rains ended, the rivers began to shrink again. The waters receded slowly, exposing the ground beneath. What had been deep channels became shallow streams. Mud and silt settled across the floodplain. Plants sprouted in the rich soil. New pathways formed where the water had once flowed. Every year, the rivers drew new maps across the land. The wetlands grew and shrank, never staying the same. These meandering rivers created complicated networks of bends and pools. Some sections flowed swiftly, others moved with barely noticeable currents. The slow waters were where crocodilians waded. Their bodies rested among fallen branches and submerged stones. Here, the riverbed formed natural traps. Deep pockets provided places where the water collected. These pools became perfect hiding places, protected from strong currents and exposed banks. The wetlands were alive with motion. Birds circled overhead, dragonflies hovered above the surface, fish swam in schools beneath the water. From the shallows to the deeper channels, life was woven together in layers. Flooding brought nutrients from distant places. Sediments settled into fertile ground that fed the vegetation. The plants gave shelter and food to herbivorous dinosaurs. These herds, large and small, eventually wandered back to the water. They grazed along the edges. They fed on the plants that thrived in wet soil. The shifting channels shaped where predators waited. Crocodilians learned the rhythms of the river. They knew where the water pulled at the banks and where sand created quiet pockets. As the river changed its course, the crocodilians followed these patterns. They positioned themselves near the deeper channels, where prey would lose its footing. They drifted through the shallows, where young dinosaurs might step into the water without realizing how deep it became. The wetlands also created confusion. The ground beneath the surface was uneven. Pools and channels hid beneath layers of plants. A dinosaur could not always tell where solid earth ended and water began. The crocodilians used this uncertainty to their advantage. They did not need to stalk prey across open ground. They simply waited for animals to come close enough. The seasonal flooding also brought new life into the wetlands. Eggs hatched during the rainy season. Young animals fed along the edges. Fish and amphibians thrived in the warm waters. With so much life concentrated in these areas, the crocodilians had many opportunities to hunt. They did not need to pursue large prey. They could feed on fish or small reptiles. Yet the presence of herds meant that their greatest opportunities came when dinosaurs approached the water to drink or cross. The shifting nature of the wetlands created a landscape that always seemed to move and breathe. Even when the waters receded, the ground remained soft. The earth held the shape of recent floods. Pools lingered in the shadows of trees. The crocodilians remained in the quieter places, where the water stayed cool and deep. These habitats became their territories. Their patience and ability to read the river gave them control over the land and water. The wetlands were not just places where animals gathered, they were ecosystems built on change. Every season reshaped the landscape. Every flood rewrote the boundaries. In this setting, crocodilians found a world that suited their hunting style. They did not have to chase prey over long distances. The shifting channels brought animals to them. The wetlands became natural stages where the ancient predators could remain invisible and powerful. Over millions of years, this cycle of flooding and recession shaped the lives of creatures that lived along the rivers. Dinosaurs moved with the seasons. Plants flourished and withered. The crocodilians stayed. Their survival depended on the world that changed around them. The wetlands gave them every advantage they needed, from hidden pools to shifting channels. In this landscape, the ancient predators waited for the world to come close. Even the largest and most powerful predators of the Cretaceous began their lives in quiet and fragile ways. Before they grew into the masters of the rivers, the giant crocodiles of ancient wetlands started as small hatchlings resting inside eggs no larger than those of modern species. Their early lives were shaped by vulnerability. Every instinct and every adaptation that helped them survive as adults began during these first delicate moments. In the sheltered corners of the wetlands, where reeds and grasses grew thick and tall, female crocodiles constructed their nests. The nests were made from vegetation, mud, and sand, raised against flooding that might sweep them away. The placement of these nurseries was chosen with care. They were built where sunlight could warm the eggs, where the ground stayed firm but moist, and where predators had a harder time finding them. Even so, the eggs faced many dangers before they ever cracked open. When the hatchlings emerged, they were tiny compared to the giants they would one day become. Their scales were soft and their teeth small. They could fit in the mouth of a larger predator. The rivers and marshes that supported the adults also held animals that could threaten the young. Birds, small dinosaurs, and even larger reptiles searched for easy meals. The first days of life demanded both caution and instinct. Survival rates were low. Many hatchlings never reached their first year. Some were taken by predators. Others were caught by the shifting wetlands when water levels changed unexpectedly. Yet those that did survive had the advantages of their ancestry. Even as juveniles, they already knew how to hide. They hugged the edges of shallow pools. They slipped into the water when danger approached. They remained still for long periods, letting their environment protect them. Growth was the key to their strength. In the first few years, the young crocodiles grew rapidly. Their bones lengthened, their muscles thickened, their bodies grew stronger each season. This fast growth was important. The sooner they reached a size that pushed them beyond the reach of smaller predators, the greater their chance of survival. Many paleontologists believe that the rapid development of young crocodilians helped their ancient ancestors survive the changing world around them. During this early period, the river was both a home and a teacher. The young crocodiles learned how to move through the water without drawing attention. They practiced staying beneath the surface with only their eyes and nostrils exposed. They learned how to adjust their bodies, using the weight of their armor and the air in their lungs to glide silently. These skills did not need to be taught by adults. They were already written into the instincts of the hatchlings. Food was abundant but not always easy to catch. Fish, insects, and small reptiles swam or crawled along the river's edge. The young crocodiles learned to snap at the right moment. They watched the movement of water. They waited for the smallest ripple. Their jaws were not yet strong enough to tackle large prey, but they were sharp enough to grasp smaller creatures. Hunting was not only about the kill, it was about learning. The river offered endless lessons. Environmental pressures shaped these early lives. Flooding could transform the nursery into a deep pool or a dry patch of cracked earth. Seasons changed the landscape and forced the young crocodiles to move. When the rains were heavy, new waterways opened across the land. When the dry season returned, the waters shrank, food sources shifted, temperatures fluctuated. Each change demanded adaptation, and the young crocodiles met these challenges through instinct and resilience. As they grew, the juveniles began to seek out new territories. They left the safety of the nursery shallow waters and explored deeper pools and riverbanks. Their bodies grew heavier, their scales thickened, their jaws became strong enough to crush larger prey. They did not yet hunt the large dinosaurs that approached the water that would come later. For now, growth was their greatest task. Some young crocodiles stayed close to the adults, though not for protection in the way mammals guard their young. The adults simply offered safety through presence. Predators were less likely to approach areas where larger crocodiles rested. The juveniles found shelter in the shadow of giants. They learned to read the river, to sense where the deeper waters lay, and to avoid exposed places where danger lurked. Those that survived their first few years carried the marks of the wetlands. Their bodies were shaped by shifting landscapes. Their instincts were sharpened by constant practice. Their growth was guided by the same forces that shaped their ancestors for millions of years. Each juvenile that reached adulthood became a continuation of this lineage, ready to claim a place in the rivers that sustained life across the land. In these ancient nurseries, the story of the giant crocodile began not with power, but with quiet persistence. The small hatchlings that slipped into the water were fragile and uncertain, yet they carried within them the potential to become the rulers of the waterways. Their early struggle was the first step in a life that would eventually bring them to the edges of the river where dinosaurs came to drink, unaware of the danger that waited beneath the surface. The rivers and wetlands of the Cretaceous were rich places, full of life and movement. Yet for all their abundance, they were not peaceful. Every creature that depended on the water understood that survival came with competition. The crocodilians were not the only predators waiting along the banks. The dinosaur world was filled with hunters, and the boundaries between land and water became shared territories where rival forces met. Near the edges of the rivers, where the soil softened into mud and reeds swayed in the breeze, theropod dinosaurs also came to hunt. These predators were powerful in their own right. They moved across the land with long strides and watched the herds that approached the river. Their claws and teeth were designed for tearing flesh. Their senses were sharp and alert. They understood the habits of the herbivores and the opportunities that water provided. While crocodilians waited in the shallows, the theropods watched from higher ground. This overlap created moments where the worlds of these predators touched. Both wanted the same prey. Both knew that the river offered the best chance to catch animals that were not aware of danger. Herds of dinosaurs could become distracted while drinking. Young dinosaurs could fall behind their groups. Injured animals became vulnerable. The river drew many hunters, and it became a stage where some of the fiercest interactions in the ancient world took place. The competition between crocodilians and theropods did not always result in direct conflict. Often, they simply shared the same hunting grounds at different distances from the water. Crocodilians held the advantage beneath the surface. Theropods claimed the ground beyond. There were invisible borders between these territories, shaped more by instinct than by physical barriers. A crocodile rarely ventured far onto land, just as a theropod seldom stepped far into deep water. Each predator stayed within the bounds of its strengths. Yet the edges of these territories were never fixed. During droughts, when rivers shrank and the ground cracked beneath the sun, both predators were drawn closer together. The water became even more valuable. Fish and smaller animals concentrated in shrinking pools. Herbivores crowded near the remaining streams. With so many creatures gathered in tight spaces, the distance between predators closed. Encounters became unavoidable. Fossils hint at these competitive moments. Some dinosaur bones carry bite marks from theropods and crocodilians alike, as if carcasses were disputed between the two. The patterns tell of scavenging and conflict. A theropod may have killed first, only for a crocodile to pull the remains into the water, or the crocodile may have taken down its prey near the river, leaving the leftovers on the bank for a theropod to find. These scraps of evidence show that the two predators did not live separate lives. They crossed paths in the struggle for food. There are also signs that some animals fell victim to both at once. A bone might show deep punctures from crocodilian teeth alongside long gouges left by theropods. This collision of markings suggests moments when the predators clashed over prey too large for either to easily dominate. These fossils do not tell us the entire story. They cannot show the movement of bodies or the rush of water, yet they reveal enough to show that competition was a part of life at the river's edge. Even footprints tell part of the tale. Trackways preserved in ancient mud show theropods pacing near the water. Their steps follow the same paths that crocodilians once used. The prints overlap as if the predators shared the same routes, each waiting for the right moment. Some tracks show hesitation or changes in direction. These markings indicate awareness. They show predators watching each other, each cautious of the other's power. Territorial disputes did not always revolve around food. Crocodilians use certain stretches of water as breeding grounds and nurseries. Theropods use the nearby forest edges as pathways and ambush points. The overlap between these areas created tension. While most encounters may have ended with simple avoidance, some almost certainly escalated. Fossils of crocodilians with healed injuries or broken teeth speak of battles that left marks on their bodies. The land and rivers were full of risk even for the strongest hunters. The presence of more than one apex predator did not diminish the success of either. Instead, it shaped their strategies. Crocodilians evolved patience and precision. They learned to use the river itself as part of their strength. Theropods evolved speed and power. They mastered the terrain that stretched beyond the riverbanks. Each predator carved its own niche. Yet their lives were intertwined through shared territory and competing needs. The river margins were places where the ancient world balanced itself. They were boundaries between environments, between strategies, and between predators. Every step across these borders carried the potential for conflict. The fossils that survive today remind us of these quiet struggles. They show the marks of ancient battles where two different hunters met in the same place and the river watched silently from its ever-changing edge. The great crocodilians of the Cretaceous did not rely only on dinosaurs to fill their bellies. Their world was full of life, and the rivers held more than enough variety to sustain even the largest of predators. Although encounters with dinosaurs shaped some of their most dramatic moments, The everyday rhythm of their diet was far more flexible. These ancient hunters were not simply specialists, they were opportunists, feeding on whatever the river or the landscape offered. Along the edges of the river, where reeds and low plants grew thick, turtles moved slowly in and out of the water. These creatures were common in the wetlands, their shells forming natural protection against many predators. Yet, they were not always safe from the jaws of a crocodile. The conical teeth of the prehistoric hunter were perfectly suited for cracking through shells. Fossils show turtle remains, bearing marks that match the bite patterns of ancient crocodilians. The shells might have resisted some force, but the jaws of the hunter were built for crushing. One hold and a powerful squeeze were often enough to break through the defense that protected the turtle's body. Fish were another reliable source of food. The rivers were alive with species adapted to the shifting water levels and seasonal floods. Some fish swam in schools, darting beneath the surface when shadows passed overhead. Others moved slowly through the deeper channels. The giant crocodiles fed on both. Their senses were tuned to detect the faintest vibrations in the water. With a quick movement of the jaws or a sudden sweep of the tail, they could capture fish without effort. Even as juveniles, crocodiles learned to feed on the steady supply of small creatures that swam through the rivers. Early mammals also lived along these waterways. They were not the dominant force that they would one day become, but they were present in the ecosystems of the Cretaceous. Some were small, quick animals that hunted insects or gathered seeds. Others lived in burrows near the riverbank. These mammals were agile, but they were not immune to the crocodile's hunting techniques. A quiet approach from below or an unexpected lunge from the water could catch them by surprise. The crocodile did not need to chase them far. It only needed one moment of opportunity. Food did not always have to be hunted. The crocodile was also a scavenger when the moment called for it. In a world where so many creatures lived and died near the river, carcasses were a regular part of the ecosystem. Floods carried the bodies of drowned animals downstream. Storms uprooted trees and swept away smaller creatures. Dinosaurs sometimes fell or became trapped in the mud. The crocodiles took advantage of these moments. They fed on the remains that washed ashore or floated into quiet pools. The river itself acted as a conveyor of opportunity. This opportunistic behavior was not a sign of weakness, it was a sign of resilience. A predator that relies only on one type of prey is vulnerable if that prey disappears. The crocodilians of the Cretaceous could shift their diet based on what the environment provided. In times of abundance, they fed on fish and mammals. In leaner seasons, they fed on turtles or carcasses. Fossil evidence supports this flexible diet. Stomach contents, preserved bone patterns, and fossils found together in certain sites all link crocodilians with a wide range of prey. Some fossils show bite marks on animals that may not have been hunted in life. These marks suggest scavenging rather than predation. A crocodile might have found the remains of a dead dinosaur and fed on what was left. The teeth of the crocodile were well suited for pulling apart tough skin and crushing bones. Even the bones of large reptiles show signs of this opportunistic feeding. The crocodile would take advantage of any available food source, wasting nothing. There were also times when natural disasters provided unexpected meals. When rivers flooded, animals were swept away and drowned. These events created temporary feasts for crocodilians. The floodwaters would drop bodies into deeper pools where the crocodiles waited. The predators did not need to hunt. The world brought food directly to them. This wide diet helped crocodilians survive through periods of change. As climates shifted and ecosystems evolved, their food sources changed with them. Yet the crocodiles always found something to eat. Their bodies were designed for efficiency, their senses were sharp, their patience meant they could wait for the next opportunity. Even today, crocodiles follow this pattern. They eat fish, turtles, birds, and mammals. They scavenge when they can. They feed on whatever the river offers. The ancient giants did the same. Their power did not come only from their ability to hunt dinosaurs. It came from their ability to thrive in a world of shifting resources. They were flexible and enduring. The river sustained them, and they sustained themselves on its endless supply of life. The world of the late Cretaceous was not always gentle, although the rivers, marshes, and floodplains created rich environments filled with life. These landscapes were shaped by forces that could change quickly. The crocodilians that lived in these wetlands had already endured millions of years of extreme climates. Their ancestors survived ancient droughts, volcanic eruptions, and shifting seas. By the time the great rivers of the Cretaceous formed, they carried within them the resilience of generations that had learned to adapt. Water was the center of their lives. It brought safety, food, and camouflage. Yet the water level did not stay constant. During periods of heavy rain, the rivers swelled and spread across the land. Floodwaters created new channels and filled shallow pools. But when the rains ended and heat returned, the water receded. Some pools dried out completely. Streams narrowed into thin ribbons of moving water. These changes forced every creature in the wetlands to adjust. The crocodilians were among the best prepared for these shifts. Their bodies were naturally suited for life in fluctuating environments. When water levels dropped, they did not need to travel long distances. They stayed in the remaining pools and deeper sections of the rivers. Even when most animals moved to follow the shrinking water, crocodilians could persist where the supply was limited. Their slow metabolism allowed them to survive on less food. Their ability to wait and conserve energy became a crucial advantage. These ancient predators developed behaviors that helped them endure dry seasons. They were capable of burrowing into the mud of riverbanks when water was scarce. When the heat grew intense, they rested in shaded pools or dug shallow pits in moist soil to stay cool. Fossils and modern observations support these behaviors. Many crocodilians today use similar techniques during droughts. They lower their bodies into the mud to protect themselves from heat and dehydration. The ancient giants likely did the same. The riverbanks themselves became shelters. The crocodiles dug into the earth with their powerful limbs. These burrows helped them stay protected when the sun was harsh. The moist soil acted as a buffer against the heat, creating a stable environment where the crocodiles could wait for rain to return. Their armor and thick skin helped them retain moisture. Even when food became scarce, they endured by slowing their heartbeat and reducing their movement. Heat waves also shaped their habits. The wetlands could become sweltering during long stretches without rain. The air shimmered over the landscape, plants wilted beneath the sun, yet the crocodilians remained near water or in shaded areas. They moved slowly and rested often. Their bodies did not need constant motion to stay strong. They could rely on their stores of energy and their ability to cool themselves by lying partially submerged in the water. These behaviors were not only about survival during difficult times, they were part of a larger pattern of adaptation that allowed crocodilians to outlast other species when the climate changed. Their homes were not always permanent. The rivers shifted, the channels moved, and the wetlands transformed season by season. While many animals might become trapped by these changes, the crocodiles embraced them. They knew how to read the environment and find places where they could continue to live. Even during more extreme climate events, the crocodilians had strategies to survive. When water sources disappeared entirely, they could travel to find new ones. Their bodies were capable of moving across land for long distances. They did not need water every day. Their slow moving metabolism allowed them to store energy and wait for better conditions. Some of the largest species may have traveled along ancient river corridors, following the flow of water as it shifted across the landscape. As climates changed over long periods of time, the crocodilians adjusted to new conditions. They survived through ice ages and warming periods. Their ancestors endured when many other reptiles disappeared. The traits that helped them thrive in the wetlands of the Cretaceous were the same ones that carried them through other eras: patience, efficiency, control over their movement and their energy. Even today, crocodiles show the same resilience. When drought comes to modern wetlands, they remain. They dig into the mud to find moisture. They lie in shallow pools and wait. They endure temperatures that would overwhelm other animals. These behaviors are ancient. They stretch back through time to the crocodiles that hunted dinosaurs and the ancestors that lived before them. The rivers of the Cretaceous offered opportunity, but also danger. Water could vanish in a single season. Floods could reshape the land and sweep animals away. Yet the crocodilians adapted to every change. Their bodies and instincts helped them endure drought, heat, and shifting water levels. They survived not because the world was easy, but because they learned how to move through every moment, whether the river was full or the land was dry. When the great crocodile once moved through the ancient rivers, its presence was clear and immediate. Today, only fragments of its body remain. These fragments are scattered across stone and sediment, separated by millions of years. None of them speak aloud. They rest in silence. Yet from these remains, scientists attempt to restore the creature's size and form. What once seemed simple becomes a careful study of shapes and proportions. Each bone becomes a clue. One of the most important bones is the skull. When paleontologists uncover even part of a skull, they hold in their hands a piece of the animal that shaped its world. The skull carries the story of the crocodile's strength. Its size and shape reveal much about the predator's overall length. Researchers measure the distance from the snout to the back of the head. They study the thickness of the bone and the width of the jaw. These measurements are far more than numbers. They become the starting point for rebuilding the animal. Skulls are important because they scale in predictable ways. Modern crocodilians give us examples that show this pattern. When a saltwater or Nile crocodile grows, its skull increases in size at a steady rate compared to the rest of the body. The relationship between skull length and total length is consistent enough that scientists can use it to estimate the size of ancient species. They compare fossil skulls with skulls from modern crocodiles. By studying these patterns, they can predict the ancient predator's total length. For example, if the fossil skull measures a certain number of centimeters, scientists look at the skull of a living crocodile with the same measurement. They observe the length of that living animal and use the ratio as a guide. This method is called proportion scaling. It allows researchers to translate the size of one part of the animal into an estimate of the whole. The method does not require a complete skeleton. Even a fragment of the skull can provide a clue. But nature is never perfectly uniform. Ancient crocodiles were not exact copies of modern species. They belonged to different branches of evolution. Their shapes and sizes changed over time. This is why proportion scaling is always done with caution. Scientists use it as a starting point, not a final answer. They compare the skull to other parts of the body when possible. Lower jaws, teeth, vertebrae, and armor plates can all offer additional information. Each bone adds another piece to the puzzle. Some fossil sites contain nearly complete skulls. These rare finds are especially valuable. They allow scientists to take more precise measurements: the length of the jaw, the angle of the snout, the placement of the eye sockets. These features can show how large the animal really was. When a nearly complete skull is discovered, researchers often re examine previous estimates. Every new discovery has the potential to change the understanding of the species. Even with these careful methods, the estimates are never perfect. There are always error margins. Scientists communicate these margins clearly, knowing that nature does not always follow predictable rules. Some ancient crocodiles may have had skulls that were larger or smaller than expected for their body length. Others may have grown wider at the torso or longer at the tail. Because of these variables, size estimates often include a range rather than a single number. Scientific debates arise from these differences. Some researchers argue that a particular species of giant crocodile might have reached more than 10 meters in length. Others suggest a more conservative size. Both perspectives rely on evidence, but the interpretation of that evidence varies. The truth often lies somewhere in between. The fossil record gives us glimpses, not complete answers. These discussions are not disagreements in the usual sense. They are part of the scientific process. With each fossil discovered, the picture becomes clearer. When a new skull fragment is found, scientists compare it to known specimens. They examine the shape and study the scale. They add new measurements to their charts. Slowly, the profile of the ancient hunter becomes more detailed. Even the smallest fragments can shift our understanding. A single tooth might reveal that the jaws were larger than previously thought. A section of armor might show that the body was broader. A jawbone might prove the predator was heavier or more robust. Each fossil adds depth to the story. Each discovery helps scientists imagine the full creature that once ruled the river. Paleontologists work with patience and humility. They know their reconstructions are temporary. They remain open to change as new evidence emerges. Their estimates reflect what is known today, shaped by comparison and reasoning. The ancient crocodile cannot stand before us, but its form can be approached through the stones that remain. In these careful measurements and thoughtful debates, a silent animal takes shape again. The skull becomes a window into the body that carried it. The fossils guide us toward the size and strength of a predator that once moved through ancient waters. The work continues, piece by piece, as science listens to the quiet clues that time has left behind. Size is not only a matter of strength, it is a conversation between life and the world that surrounds it. For the giant crocodiles that lived in the late Cretaceous, their immense bodies were not just accidents of evolution. They were the result of a landscape that encouraged growth and rewarded those who could take full advantage of it. Every feature of their environment worked together to allow these ancient predators to become some of the largest reptiles that ever lived. The rivers and wetlands provided endless food. Herds of herbivorous dinosaurs grazed along the banks. Smaller reptiles, fish, turtles, and early mammals moved through the shallow waters. Floods washed nutrients into the riverbeds. The wetlands were full of life. The crocodilians did not struggle to find prey. They did not need to chase their meals across long distances. They simply waited at the edges of the water where the world came to them. Abundant prey meant that they could grow larger without worrying about starvation. Their size also helped them make the most of every opportunity. A larger crocodile could take down bigger prey. It could pull heavier animals into the water. It could dominate the best hunting grounds. Growing larger was not only a result of food availability, it was also a strategy for controlling the river. When two crocodilians met near the water, the larger individual usually had the advantage. It claimed the deeper pools and the shaded resting places. It won the territory that offered the most abundant prey. The warm global climate of the Cretaceous encouraged this growth. During that time, the world was warmer than it is today. The air held more moisture. The oceans spread heat into the continents. Winters were mild and short. Summers were long and humid. These conditions created environments where reptiles could grow quickly. Their bodies did not need to conserve heat. The warmth was already present in the air and the water. It surrounded them from the moment they hatched until they reached adulthood. Reptiles benefit from warm climates in ways that mammals and birds do not. Their bodies rely on external temperatures to regulate their energy. When the world is warm, their metabolism becomes more efficient. They need less effort to stay active. They grow faster. This was especially true for crocodilians. The warm water supported their weight. Their muscles stayed ready for movement. Their bones grew strong without being limited by cold seasons. Over generations, this created species that reached incredible size. Another factor was the slow metabolism of crocodilians. Unlike animals that burn energy constantly, crocodiles can conserve it. They do not need to eat every day. Their bodies are designed to store energy from large meals and use it slowly. This allowed them to grow gradually over many years. They were not limited by the need to constantly hunt. They could wait. They could choose the moments when feeding was easiest. Their patience became one of their greatest strengths. Slow metabolism also meant that large body size was sustainable. The crocodiles did not need constant food to maintain their mass. They could rest in the water for long periods. They could stay submerged, watching the world move above them. Their bodies did not waste energy. They used only what they needed. This efficiency helped them expand their size over time without danger of collapse. Competition also played a role. The Cretaceous hosted many large predators. Theropods dominated the land. Other crocodilians shared the rivers. In such a world, being larger offered powerful advantages. It made the crocodile more secure from attacks. It discouraged smaller predators. It provided access to the best territory. A bigger body could withstand the force of prey that struggled in the water. It could survive injuries that might kill a smaller animal. Being large also shaped the hunting strategy of these giants. A massive crocodile did not need to rely on speed. It could strike with power and precision. Its jaws held more force. Its movements carried more weight. It became a creature that relied on strength rather than agility. The river itself supported the bulk of its body. Gravity was softened by the water. With each slow breath, the crocodile became part of the landscape. The growth of these giants was the result of many forces acting together. Abundant prey ensured that food was always available. The warm climate provided the perfect conditions for growth. Slow metabolism allowed the crocodiles to reach enormous size without draining their energy. Competition pushed them to become stronger and more dominant. Each factor blended into the next, creating a world where size became both a survival tool and a symbol of ancient power. These crocodilians did not grow large by accident. Their size was the shape of their environment. It was written into the rivers and the climate. It was encouraged by prey that came to drink at the water's edge. In the end, their size was a reflection of a world that rewarded patience and power. The giant crocodiles grew because the land and water allowed them to become the rulers of the ancient wetlands. The giant crocodiles that lived along the waterways of the Cretaceous are often pictured as solitary hunters, resting in still water and waiting for the perfect moment. Yet the ancient world was rarely so simple. Even in silence and waiting, there were signs that these creatures were not always alone. Their fossils and the behavior of their living relatives give us hints that their lives may have been shaped by more complex social patterns than we usually imagine. Some of the earliest clues come from bone beds. These are fossil sites where the remains of multiple crocodilians were buried together. The bones are found resting side by side, layered in sediment that once drifted through the currents of ancient rivers. When paleontologists uncover these sites, they do not see a single skeleton isolated in the earth. They see groups. The bones show different ages and sizes, as if the crocodiles lived or died near one another. Some bone beds contain large adults, while others include juveniles and younger individuals. These groupings suggest that crocodiles may have shared territory or stayed close when conditions allowed. The arrangement of the bones also tells part of the story. In some fossil deposits, the remains appear clustered rather than scattered. This pattern hints that the crocodiles may have used the same stretches of river and the same resting places. Perhaps groups of crocodiles found safety in the company of others, especially during moments when prey was abundant or when water levels were low. These shared spaces were shaped by the land itself, by the curves of the river and the deep channels that drew life together. Modern crocodilians offer additional clues. Today, many crocodile species are not strictly solitary. Saltwater crocodiles gather in feeding areas when fish are plentiful. Nile crocodiles rest in groups along the banks of rivers during the hottest hours of the day. Young crocodiles linger close to larger adults, using the presence of stronger individuals as protection. These gatherings are not random. They are shaped by instinct and by the same forces that guided their ancient ancestors. The same behaviors that help modern crocodiles survive have deep roots in history. Even their nesting habits suggest social bonds. Female crocodiles often build nests near one another. The hatchlings sometimes move together toward the water, forming small groups that drift into the shallows. These early gatherings are not just accidents of birth, they are shaped by shared territory and shared safety. Juveniles grow stronger by staying near places protected by adults. Fossil evidence hints that ancient crocodiles may have behaved in similar ways. The remains of young individuals found near larger ones suggest that the same patterns might have existed long ago. In some places, paleontologists have discovered fossils of several juveniles close to one another. Their bones are small and delicate, yet they rest together in the same sediment. These groupings suggest that young crocodiles stayed near each other during their early years. Staying in groups would have offered advantages. It made them harder targets for predators. It gave them better access to warm waters and food. It allowed them to learn from the older crocodiles that shared the river. Protection of the young may have been an important part of their lives. Modern crocodile mothers guard their nests. They stay close when the eggs are ready to hatch. They watch over the hatchlings and lead them to the water. Some species even carry their young in their jaws to keep them safe. While we cannot know how ancient crocodiles behaved with complete certainty, their fossil record and modern behavior suggest that juvenile protection existed in some form. The first steps into the river may have been guided by the presence of others, by adults who knew the safest waters and the deepest pools. Social behavior does not always mean living in large groups. For the ancient crocodiles, it may have meant something quieter. They may have rested near one another during the heat of the day. They may have shared the same hunting grounds without conflict. They may have tolerated the presence of others when food was plentiful. They may have formed loose gatherings during moments when water drew animals together. Their social lives may have been shaped by the river, not by complex communication or hierarchy. Even the way crocodiles gather near carcasses provides hints. Fossils of multiple predators found near the same prey suggest moments when several individuals fed in the same place. These were not random encounters. They reflect the natural pull of the river where food and danger came together. The river was a meeting place for all the life it supported. The crocodiles were drawn into this world, and they learned to share it in ways that allowed them to survive. Their social behavior was likely fluid. They were not bound to groups, but they were not always alone. They moved in patterns that reflected opportunity and instinct. They shared space when it was safe, and they separated when conditions demanded. Their world was full of small gatherings and temporary alliances, shaped by seasons and by the flow of water. In these quiet patterns, the ancient crocodiles revealed a deeper story. Their lives were not defined only by solitude or by dominance. They were shaped by a balance between independence and presence, by the rhythm of the river and the silent company of others who shared the same ancient waters. The rivers of the Cretaceous did not always flow with gentle currents. Beneath their calm surfaces lay the memory of moments when water transformed the land with sudden strength. These ancient river systems were shaped by more than the steady pull of tides and seasons. They were also sculpted by floods powerful enough to change the course of life for every creature that lived near their banks. During heavy rains, distant storms gathered moisture from warm seas and carried it across the land. Clouds thickened above the wide floodplains. When the rain came, it often arrived with intensity. The river swelled in a matter of days. The quiet shallows deepened into fast currents. Pools merged into wide channels. The earth softened and broke open. Water spread outward, swallowing everything in its path. Fallen logs, branches, and loose soil were carried downstream like pieces of a greater puzzle. These floods were not rare accidents. They were part of the rhythm of the landscape. Over long stretches of time, entire river systems were reshaped by these sudden surges. New pathways opened across the land. Old channels disappeared beneath layers of sediment. The wetlands expanded and contracted as the floods carved new lines across the earth. With every change, the river created habitats where life gathered again. The floods left behind more than fresh water. They deposited vast layers of gravel, sand, and silt along the floodplains. These sediments preserved traces of the animals that once lived there. When the waters receded, they left fossils hidden in the layers. Bones settled into the soft earth. Tracks were filled with mud and hardened into stone. Sometimes, whole skeletons were buried within a single surge of water. The river became a keeper of memories. Some of the richest fossil deposits today are the remains of these ancient floods. Paleontologists uncover layers of sediment packed with bones, shells, and plant material. They reveal the stories of animals caught in the flow. Dinosaurs that approached the water may have been swept away. Fish and turtles were buried beneath sand. Even crocodiles became trapped in the shifting ground. Over millions of years, these fossils hardened and became part of the Earth's history. Megafloods were among the most powerful forces in these ancient river systems. They occurred when walls of water broke free from their usual paths and surged across the landscape. These floods were far larger than the seasonal rains. They reshaped entire regions. Rivers widened, new lakes formed. The flow of water carved deep channels into the land. The remains of these events are etched into the rock layers that paleontologists study today. In these layers, scientists find sudden changes in sediment. A fine layer of mud rests beneath thick deposits of gravel and sand. This pattern suggests rapid burial. It shows that the floodwaters arrived abruptly and receded just as quickly. Fossils found in these deposits are often well preserved. The animals were buried before scavengers could reach them. Their bones remained undisturbed for millions of years. Megafloods did more than bury fossils. They redistributed life. When the waters rushed across the land, they carried animals and plants into new regions. Crocodiles were swept downstream into deeper waters. Herds of dinosaurs were displaced from their feeding grounds. Smaller animals clung to driftwood or climbed trees for safety. Some survivors found themselves in new places when the waters receded. These sudden changes forced species to adapt and migrate. For the crocodilians, the floods brought both challenge and opportunity. Their bodies were built for water. They could survive by riding the currents or finding shelter in deep pools. The floods also delivered new prey. Fish, turtles, and young dinosaurs were drawn into the river. When the water settled, the crocodiles found themselves in landscapes rich with food. The megafloods reset the balance of the wetlands. They created new channels and new hunting grounds. The ancient rivers also linked distant ecosystems. When megafloods carried sediment and life downstream, they connected places that were once far apart. New habitats formed where the water slowed and pooled. Vegetation grew in fresh soil. Animals returned to drink and feed. The land became a mosaic of shifting environments, each shaped by the flow of water. These pathways allowed species to move into new territories. Over time, the rivers carved memories into the landscape. The sediment layers formed a record of changing worlds. Fossils tell us that every flood reshaped the edges of life. They remind us that the ancient crocodiles lived in a dynamic environment. Their world was not fixed or stable. It changed with each surge of water. These predators learned to wait for the opportunities that the floods created. As paleontologists study these ancient river systems, they uncover stories of sudden change and renewal. They see how megafloods created the wetlands where crocodilians thrived. They see the way the land was reshaped again and again. In these quiet layers of sediment, we find the echoes of life carried by the river's power. Even with all that ancient rivers have given us, there is still so much they have kept hidden. The story of the giant crocodile is not told through perfect skeletons or complete remains. It is shaped from fragments, scattered bones, and occasional traces left in stone. These pieces allow us to imagine the predator that once hunted dinosaurs, yet they also remind us how much has been lost to time. The fossil record of crocodilians is full of gaps. Large parts of their history are missing. For every skull or tooth that survives, countless others dissolved, crumbled, or drifted away before they could ever become stone. No matter how carefully scientists search, the story remains incomplete. The rivers that once supported so much life did not always preserve the remains of those who lived within them. Aquatic predators are some of the hardest animals to fossilize. Their bodies rest in places where currents break down bone. Sediment shifts and moves with every season. Water carries pieces of skeletons away before they can settle. The soft mud that surrounds a fresh carcass might protect it for a moment, but as the river changes course, the protection disappears. The bones are scattered. They sink deeper. They are worn down by time. Most crocodiles spent much of their lives in water. This gave them every advantage as ambush predators, yet it took away the chance of preserving their bodies. Fossilization requires stillness and burial. It needs calm sediment and a moment of quiet. But rivers are rarely still for long. The water was always moving. Floods and storms shifted the ground. Carcasses were dragged into new places. Some bones were buried quickly. Others never had that chance. Even when the bones did survive, they often broke apart before scientists found them. Armor plates separated from the skull. Teeth fell loose and scattered through the sediment. Sometimes only a single bone remains to tell us the animal ever lived. These fragments are valuable, but they can only say so much. They offer glimpses, not complete portraits. This is why scientists often rely on comparisons with modern crocodiles and with other fossil relatives. The missing pieces of the past are filled with careful reasoning, yet the gaps remind us that much of this world is still undiscovered. There are likely many species we have never found. Some may have been larger or smaller than anything we know. Others may have lived in places where fossilization was nearly impossible. Scientists continue to search for answers in new places. Some of the most promising sites lie in riverbeds once buried beneath ancient floodplains. These sediments hold layers of time pressed together. They may hide fossils beneath the surface that have not yet been seen. Paleontologists use modern tools to study these deposits. Ground penetrating scans, delicate excavation, and careful mapping help uncover bones that might otherwise remain buried. There are also places where ancient rivers have long since vanished. Deserts now stretch across the land where water once flowed. Beneath the sand, the memory of those rivers remains. Fossils have been found in these dry landscapes, preserved by the sediment once carried by flowing water. Every year brings new discoveries. Each find expands the story and fills in another page of the ancient record. The search continues in regions that are difficult to access. Dense jungles, steep cliffs, and remote valleys hold secrets beneath their soil. Some rivers still carve fresh paths through stone. These places offer clues that have been worn away in older landscapes. Scientists travel across continents and dig through layers of rock to uncover fossils. They follow the flow of ancient waterways, tracing the footsteps of predators that have been gone for millions of years. Even the oceans hold stories of ancient crocodilians. Some species wandered into the saltwater or lived along the coasts. These lineages have left traces in marine sediment. Their fossils hint at migrations and adaptations that once connected rivers to the sea. These discoveries show how much remains unknown. The more scientists learn, the more questions appear. The limits of our knowledge do not diminish the wonder of what has been found. They inspire new exploration. The fossil record is incomplete, yet it invites us to imagine the world that once was. It teaches us to look closely at the smallest detail: a tooth embedded in stone, a fragment of jaw, a single scale. Each discovery reveals a part of the story. Scientists continue to hope for more. New fossil sites may hold answers to questions we have not yet thought to ask. There are valleys where ancient rivers flowed for centuries. There are layers of sediment that have not been opened. Beneath those stones, the bones of giant crocodiles may still sleep. The gaps in the fossil record remind us that the story of the ancient rivers is far from finished. Much of it remains hidden beneath the earth, waiting for the moment when it will be found. The story of any ancient creature depends on more than the life it lived. It also depends on the uncommon set of forces that allowed parts of that life to survive through deep time. Most animals, even the most fearsome, vanish without a trace. Their bones become dust. Their stories dissolve into the soil. Yet every now and then, the earth provides the perfect conditions for memory to last. The remains of the giant crocodiles owe their survival to those rare moments when geology and biology came together. Rapid burial is one of the first steps toward preservation. It may happen when a river changes course or when heavy rains overflow its banks. Fresh sediment sweeps across the land and settles over anything caught beneath. A carcass lying at the edge of the water becomes covered in layers of silt and sand. Fine particles settle into every curve and hollow. This blanket protects the body from scavengers and shields it from the open air. The world above continues to move, yet beneath that layer of sediment, time slows. In these moments, the river becomes a quiet archive. The burial may have happened suddenly, The creature may have been resting in a shallow pool or washed downstream by a minor flood. Whatever the cause, the water brought sediment quickly enough to cover the remains before they could break apart. This is why so many fossils are found in places where rivers once flowed. Water acts as both a destroyer and a guardian. It carries life away, yet it also offers protection to those who settle beneath it. Once buried, the remains enter a different world. The earth beneath the surface is often deprived of oxygen. These anaerobic environments slow decay. Bacteria cannot break down bone as easily in the absence of air. The burial layers create a seal, trapping the carcass in a still and dark space. The bone might lie there for years or centuries before other geological forces begin their work. As sediment continues to gather, the weight above increases. The pressure compacts the layers, squeezing water through the particles. Slowly, the buried remains harden. The soft tissues disappear first, leaving the bones behind. Even then, the bones do not stay unchanged. Over thousands of years, water dissolves minerals within the earth and carries them through the sediments. These minerals seep into the spaces left behind. This is the beginning of mineral replacement. The original bone structure remains, yet it gradually transforms. The minerals settle into the tiny pores and cracks within the bone, strengthening it and turning it into stone. The process does not happen quickly. It may take hundreds of thousands of years. The transformation is slow and patient. The bones become part of the surrounding rock, preserved in the same position where they once lay. Different minerals create different colors and textures in the fossils. Some bones take on deep browns or blacks, others become pale and smooth. These details show the chemistry of the ancient water. They reveal the minerals that moved through the earth during the burial. The fossils are more than bones. They are records of the environment itself. They hold the story of the world around them. In some places, the fossils are so well preserved that the smallest details remain. The bite marks and fractures survive. The shape of the jaw and the curve of the teeth remain sharp. These fossils allow scientists to understand how the crocodiles lived and hunted. They show muscle attachments and the architecture of the skull. Each detail offers a window into the life of an animal that once prowled the rivers. Not every fossil is perfect. Some bones are broken or worn. They may have been exposed before burial or transported by water, yet even these fragments tell part of the story. They show how the body moved through the environment after death. They reveal the path of the river and the way sediment shifted across the land. The layers above the fossils also hold information. Each layer of rock is a chapter of time pressed into stone. Paleontologists read these layers like the pages of a book. They look for clues about the climate and the changes in the landscape. The fossils are part of a larger story. They are surrounded by the memory of ancient forests, floodplains, and shifting channels. The geological forces that preserve fossils are rare, yet they are the reason we know these creatures existed. Without rapid burial, anaerobic conditions, and mineral replacement, the bones would have disappeared. They would have returned to the soil long before humans ever walked the earth. Instead, they remained hidden beneath the ground, waiting for the moment they would be uncovered. As scientists extract these fossils from the earth, they hold pieces of a world transformed by time. The stones carry the weight of millions of years. The bones hold the memory of predators that once watched the riverbanks. Their preservation is not an accident. It is the result of the earth's quiet patience. The ancient river gave them life, and the sediment beneath it gave them a place in the story that continues today. The rise of the giant crocodiles was tied to warm rivers, rich wetlands, and the constant pulse of life along the water's edge. Yet no world remains unchanged forever. As the Cretaceous moved through its final chapters, the great forces that had once supported these predators slowly shifted. The decline of these ancient hunters was not sudden. It unfolded across long ages, guided by climate, by the changing shape of the land, and by the quiet transformation of the creatures they relied upon for survival. The climate of the late Cretaceous began to cool. The heat that had once nurtured enormous bodies and fast growing ecosystems grew less consistent. The long summers shortened. Winters crept a little further south. Even small shifts in temperature could influence the balance of life near the rivers. Warm water holds more energy. It feeds plants and supports insects and fish. Cooler water changes that rhythm. Growth slows. The food web tightens. The entire river system transforms, not in a single moment, but over many generations. For the giant crocodiles, these changes would have been felt in their hunting grounds. The banks where prey once gathered grew quiet. Pools that once held fish may have dried during certain seasons or grown colder than before. A river does not remain the same shape when the climate shifts. Gravel beds move, long channels fill with silt. New branches form and old ones close. Entire wetlands shrink or give way to forest. Even small changes in flow redirect life along new paths. As the climate cooled, the river systems began to change shape. The meandering channels that once stretched through wide floodplains narrowed in places. Water flowed through different routes. Pools that had once been deep enough for ambush became shallow. Other places turned into marshland. The expansion and contraction of the waterways did not favor every predator equally. Some crocodile species thrived for a while. Others saw their hunting grounds disappear. The river began to choose which animals it would continue to support. The decline in giant crocodiles is tied not only to water, but also to the creatures that lived beside it. The prey they had once relied on began to change. Herbivorous dinosaurs adapted to new plants and new climates. Their populations rose and fell with the shifting environment. Some species moved away from the rivers or spent more time grazing in drier regions. Others traveled in larger groups or changed their migration routes. As prey changed, so did the challenges of hunting. For the crocodiles, every shift in prey availability carried weight. These large predators had grown to enormous sizes because food had been abundant. Fish, turtles, young dinosaurs, and the carcasses of drowned animals had once been plentiful. But as temperatures fell and plant life shifted, the balance of the ecosystem changed. Fewer animals approached the rivers as regularly. Herds adjusted their feeding patterns. The water's edge became less predictable. Along with climate and prey, another transformation was taking place. The world was slowly preparing for a much larger change. Ecosystems were fragmenting. Some regions experienced droughts. Others saw increased rainfall. These irregularities created instability in the food chain. The once reliable patterns of life along the river began to break apart. The large crocodiles faced a world that no longer offered the same abundance that had allowed them to grow so massive. Smaller crocodile species were often better suited to survive these conditions. They needed less food. They could take shelter in tighter spaces. Their young could hide in shallow pools where the giant hunters could not pursue. These differences allowed smaller species to persist where the giants struggled. Over time, the great predators became less common. Their numbers dwindled slowly, leaving only traces in the fossil record. Other changes in the environment added to the decline. Volcanic activity in some regions created new landscapes and altered the flow of water. Sea levels rose and fell, exposing new land and drowning other habitats. The world was never still. It moved in cycles that rewrote the geography of life. The giant crocodiles had once thrived in this shifting world, yet even their resilience had limits. Near the end of the Cretaceous, the river systems that had once supported them became more variable. Some areas became too cold, others dried out. The ancient wetlands that had protected juveniles and fed adults did not always return. The giant predators may have faced long seasons of scarcity. They may have sought deeper water or new hunting grounds. Some may have migrated as the rivers changed course. Others stayed and faded as their world transformed around them. Their decline was quiet compared to the dramatic end that awaited many creatures in the final moments of the Cretaceous. The story of the giant crocodiles is one of slow change. Their disappearance was not a single event. It was the result of a world reorganizing itself. Climate cooling reshaped the land, changing river systems redirected life. Shifts in prey forced predators to adapt or retreat. Even in their decline, these crocodiles reveal the rhythms of the ancient world. They show how even the mightiest creatures relied on the balance of their environment. The rivers had once given them strength. In the end, those same waters changed in ways that no longer supported their size or their way of life. Their story became another chapter in Earth's long history, shaped by nature and by time. In the world we know now, crocodiles still live along the edges of rivers and coasts. They move with the same quiet power and patience that their ancestors once carried, yet none reach the size of those ancient giants. No modern river holds a predator as large as the ones that hunted dinosaurs. The reasons for this absence are scattered across time, shaped by the changes in the earth itself and by the transformations of life that came after the Cretaceous. The ecosystems of today are very different from those ancient wetlands. The Cretaceous was a world of warmth and abundance, where high temperatures encouraged growth in every corner of the landscape. Water flowed through wide floodplains and deep channels, carrying nutrients that fed plants and animals alike. Prey moved in large numbers along the riverbanks. The giants could grow slowly and reach remarkable sizes because the world offered the right conditions. It was a place where large bodies were rewarded, not challenged. In our time, the climate is cooler and more variable. Even the warmest tropical rivers experience shifts in water level, temperature, and food supply. These changes place pressure on large animals. A predator that grows too big needs a steady flow of prey. It must defend wide territories. It must balance the cost of living with the energy it can gather. Modern crocodiles are still powerful hunters, but the world no longer supports the kind of sustained abundance that allowed giants to thrive. The rivers themselves are also different. Many of today's ecosystems are narrower and more fragmented. Human activity has divided waterways with dams, farmlands, and cities. Wetlands have been drained or changed. The ancient river systems once expanded and contracted with the rhythm of the climate. They moved freely across the land. Modern rivers are often confined. Their paths are shaped by human hands, and their shores no longer form the sprawling habitats that once supported giant predators. The story also reaches back to a moment long before humans appeared. Near the end of the Cretaceous, an asteroid struck the Earth and changed life forever. The extinction that followed did not discriminate between giants and smaller species. The impact unleashed fires, darkness, and climate shifts that reshaped ecosystems across the world. Many large creatures were wiped away. Even those that survived the initial event faced a different world after the dust settled. The giant crocodiles were among those affected by these extinction pressures. Their populations may have already been declining as the climate cooled and the rivers shifted. The asteroid impact pushed many species past the edge of survival. This event created what scientists call a bottleneck. Only some species of crocodilians passed through this narrow passage of extinction. The survivors were smaller, more adaptable, and better suited to the world that came after the Cretaceous. These bottlenecks shaped the evolutionary path of crocodiles. The ancestors of modern species carried only a portion of the traits that once allowed giants to grow. Over millions of years, they spread across new environments. They adapted to different rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. Their bodies changed, their sizes stabilized. They no longer reached the immense proportions of their ancient relatives. The world rewarded a different set of strengths. The impact of humans added another layer to this story. Our presence along rivers and coasts has changed the lives of crocodiles in ways that never happened before. Habitat loss, hunting, and conflict have reduced their populations. Large animals need large spaces, and those spaces are now rare. Even the most powerful predators must share their environment with farms, boats, and expanding cities. The rivers no longer offer the peaceful stretches where a true giant could live unchallenged. Modern crocodiles have also learned to navigate a world filled with new dangers. They move carefully through changing landscapes. They hunt smaller prey more often. They rarely grow beyond a size that the environment can support. The giant crocodiles of the Cretaceous were shaped by a world that no longer exists. Their absence is not a sign of weakness, but a reflection of the Earth's long transformation. Even though no giants remain, their legacy continues. The crocodiles we see today carry echoes of their prehistoric ancestors. Their skulls hold the same architecture, their muscles move with the same quiet power. Their eyes watch the water with the same patience. The world has changed around them, yet they endure. They survive in saltwater coasts and tropical rivers. They rest in the shallows and emerge to hunt under the same moon that once shone on the giants. The absence of giants reminds us that life responds to the environment around it. When the world favors large hunters, they rise. When it shifts, they fade. The ecosystems of today reward smaller bodies and adaptable habits. The giant crocodiles belong to a different world, one shaped by warm climates and endless wetlands. Their story is part of the ancient memory of Earth, written into stone and hidden beneath the rivers that shaped their lives. The rivers carry their history quietly. Modern crocodiles rest on riverbanks where giants once lived. The world has changed, yet traces of that distant era remain, woven into the bones and the instincts of the creatures that survived. Although the giant crocodiles of the Cretaceous vanished with their age, their legacy did not disappear with them. It continued to flow quietly through time, carried forward in the bodies and instincts of the crocodilians that survived. The world changed. The climate cooled. New creatures rose and fell. Yet the shape and spirit of those ancient hunters linger in the predators that rest along the riverbanks today. Modern crocodiles may be smaller than their prehistoric ancestors, yet their bodies hold echoes of that ancient design. Their skulls still carry the familiar low and powerful shape. Their jaws still contain rows of conical teeth made for gripping and crushing. Their eyes still rise just above the surface of the water, allowing them to watch without revealing their presence. These details are not the result of chance. They are the marks of a lineage shaped by millions of years of survival. Inside their bones and blood, genetic similarities reveal the long history shared with the giants of the past. The genes that control growth and metabolism, the ones that guide the development of their armor and the strength of their jaws, have been preserved through time. They passed from ancestor to descendant like memories within the cells. Scientists study these connections by comparing modern crocodile DNA with the fossils and remains of ancient relatives. They find patterns that stretch across deep time. The story is written not only in stone, but in the fabric of life itself. These genetic threads are one reason crocodiles have changed so little compared to other animals. While many species evolved rapidly, adapting to new environments and new challenges, crocodiles followed a different path. Their basic design was already a successful one. Evolution favored stability. It passed the same blueprint from one age to the next. The ancient crocodiles grew larger because the world allowed it. The smaller ones survived because they could endure periods of scarcity. The core of their nature remained the same. Even their behavior reflects the habits of their ancestors. Modern crocodiles still hunt with patience. They wait beneath the surface, motionless except for the slight drift of the current. They strike with speed and precision when the moment is right. Their ambush is not random or chaotic. It is guided by instincts that stretch back millions of years. The ancient crocodiles used similar strategies. Their hunting style was shaped by rivers and wetlands just as it is today. Their social behavior carries echoes as well. Modern crocodiles gather in places where food is plentiful. They rest in groups near the water, tolerating the presence of other individuals. Young crocodiles often remain near their mothers, protected by the larger body that guards the riverbank. These patterns mirror the fossil evidence of ancient relatives. The same instincts that guided the giants guide their descendants. Even the environments they choose reveal the legacy of the past. Modern crocodiles seek the same edges of the world that once supported the giants. They rest along tropical rivers, in coastal swamps, and in murky estuaries. They take advantage of the places where land and water meet. These boundaries have always been the heart of their survival. The ancient crocodiles thrived in the same spaces. The world of today may be different, yet the rivers still hold the memory of the ones that came before. The way modern crocodiles feed also resembles their ancestors. They scavenge when they can. They take advantage of weakened or wounded prey. They hunt animals that come to drink at the water's edge. They seize fish and turtles with practiced skill. The techniques of ancient predators did not vanish. They became habits carried forward by time. Every movement is rooted in a story written across millions of years. Scientists have even found evidence that modern crocodiles respond to environmental changes in ways similar to their ancient relatives. When water levels shift or when food becomes scarce, crocodiles adapt. They move to new areas. They change their feeding patterns. They rest in cooler pools during heat waves. These behaviors helped the giants endure the shifting world of the Cretaceous. They continue to help their descendants survive in a changing world today. The legacy of the giant crocodiles is not measured only in biology. It is stored in the way they move, in the way they wait, and in the way they emerge from the water at the exact moment they choose. It is written in the ripple that spreads across a river when a crocodile rises from below. It is etched into the smooth armor that shields their bodies and in the steady stillness with which they watch their surroundings. When we look at a modern crocodile resting along the banks of a river, we are looking at a living connection to an ancient world. The shape of its skull, the rhythm of its breath, the slow lift of its eyes above the water, all reflect the memory of an age when giants lived. The world that once supported huge predators has changed, but the ideas that shaped those creatures have not been lost. The ancient crocodiles may be gone, but their story survives in the creatures that glide through today's rivers. Their presence is a reminder that nature carries its history forward, even when the world changes around it. The legacy of those giant hunters still flows through the currents of life. When we imagine the ancient world, it is easy to picture dinosaurs as the unquestioned rulers of their time. Their size and strength seem to define the landscape. Their long strides and towering bodies appear to declare dominance over every other creature. Yet the truth of that world is more balanced and far more intricate. The great crocodiles that waded in the rivers remind us that power was shared. No single creature owned the land or controlled the story. Instead, every life was part of a vast web of connection where even the most formidable predators were not free from danger. The rivers of the Cretaceous held a different perspective. They watched as herds of herbivores crossed their banks. They saw tyrannosaurs move along the forests, following the scent of prey. They also saw moments when these powerful hunters approached water to drink, unaware of the presence below. The great crocodiles did not challenge dinosaurs by matching their size on land. They did not need to roam openly or claim territory across wide plains. Their power lay in patience and stillness. They waited beneath the surface, invisible in the slow current. This is the balance that shaped the ancient world. Dinosaurs were predators on land. They hunted with speed and with teeth made for slicing flesh. Yet near the water, they were vulnerable. The crocodiles knew the habits of these giants. They knew where herds crossed. They knew where young animals stayed close to their parents. They knew when the river's edge became a gathering place. Their attacks came from a different realm, guided by instincts that belonged to the river. When a dinosaur approached the water, the rules changed. The crocodile held the advantage. Its body was shaped for sudden movement. Its jaws were built to grip and hold. Even a tyrannosaur was not safe if it waded too deeply into a strong current. The river did not recognize the dominance of the land. It offered its own form of power. This is why the ancient world was not built on a single hierarchy. It was a shifting landscape where every predator had its place. The crocodiles and the dinosaurs were part of a shared ecosystem. They did not dominate each other. They shaped each other. The presence of giant predators near the riverbanks influenced where dinosaurs traveled. It changed their behavior and their movement. Herds gathered together when crossing. They watched for ripples on the surface. They approached water with caution. The crocodiles responded in their own way. They learned to recognize the steps that vibrated through the ground. They listened to the sounds of herds moving near the shore. This balance created moments where even the mightiest dinosaurs were prey. Fossils reveal the stories of these encounters. Bite marks appear on bones from both herbivores and carnivores. The patterns of the wounds show the power of the crocodile's bite. These marks do not belong to simple kills. They belong to a predator that changed the outcome of life near the water. Even the largest dinosaurs had to respect the rivers. Their size made them powerful, but it also made them vulnerable. A heavy body could sink into mud. A long neck or tail could become a disadvantage if trapped in strong currents. The crocodiles used the water as a tool. They needed no speed on land. They needed no roar. Their power lay in waiting. If we imagine this world only through the lens of the dinosaurs, we miss half the story. We see only the creatures that walked across the land, but the river and its hunters shape a different image. They remind us that the ancient world was not a kingdom ruled by a single species. It was a place where life coexisted in delicate balance. Every predator was also prey. Every creature relied on the land and the water in different ways. This understanding also changes the way we view the dinosaurs themselves. They were predators, but they were also part of an ecosystem that connected every life together. They fed on other animals, and in turn, they faced danger from creatures that hunted differently. When we look at the ancient world with this perspective, the stories of these animals become richer. We see cooperation and competition. We see fear and power shared among many species. The giant crocodiles were not the opposite of the dinosaurs. They were one of the forces that shaped their world. Their presence balanced the power of the land. Their hunting reminded even the strongest dinosaurs that the river held its own silent authority. The world was not built on dominance, it was built on connection. Dinosaurs were rulers of the land, yet they were also part of a larger story where every creature found its place within the flow of life. The story of the ancient crocodiles and their quiet rivalry with the dinosaurs is far from complete. Every year, new pieces of their world are uncovered, not only in the desert and in the mountains, but also in the riverbeds that once carried the memories of their lives. For all that we have learned from fossils and geology, there are still chapters of their history hidden beneath the surface of the earth, waiting for the moment when they will be brought into the light. There are many places where the rivers of the past once flowed that have never been explored. Some lie buried beneath layers of sediment that have not been disturbed for millions of years. Others rest beneath dense vegetation or remote landscapes where few scientists have traveled. These unexcavated riverbeds hold the promise of new discoveries. They may contain bones from species that have never been named, footprints that show lost pathways, or sediments that reveal how life once moved across these ancient waterways. When paleontologists find these untouched sites, they do not simply dig at random. They study the ground carefully. They follow the patterns of erosion, the direction of old river currents, and the layers of sediment that hold the memory of time. In these quiet places, a fossil might rest only a few centimeters below the surface, or it may lie deep beneath rock that has not been exposed in millions of years. The land gives its secrets slowly, but it gives them to those who look closely. The tools used to uncover these fossils have also changed. In the past, discoveries relied almost entirely on the careful work of hands and brushes. Today, technology allows scientists to see inside the earth in ways that were once impossible. CT scanning offers a window into the stone. When fossils are still encased in rock, these machines reveal the shapes hidden within. They show the curves of bones, the tiny fractures in teeth, and the fine details of ancient jaws. They allow paleontologists to study the fossils without removing them from their stone shells. This technology can also look beneath the ground. Some scanners can read the density of rock beneath the surface. They can find shapes that are not visible to the eye. They allow scientists to plan an excavation before ever lifting a tool. In deep deposits, CT scanning reveals layers of sediment that once held the flow of ancient water. It helps researchers understand where fossils might lie and where the river once changed direction. The patterns become clearer when the earth itself can be studied from within. These discoveries do not happen in isolation. Paleontologists travel across continents to find the stories of the past. They journey to tropical forests, wide deserts, and high mountains. They explore riverbeds that have long since dried and floodplains that have turned to stone. Each expedition is shaped by careful planning and by the hope of finding something new beneath the ground. Sometimes the work reveals only fragments. Other times, it uncovers entire skeletons, preserved through millions of years. The stories they find are not always what they expect. Fossils may show species that lived alongside the giants, but were never known before. They reveal the details of how ancient crocodiles hunted, moved, and grew. They also reveal the lives of the creatures that lived beside them. These discoveries add new pages to the history of the ancient rivers. They help explain how ecosystems adapted and transformed. Some expeditions search old sites with modern tools. They return to places where earlier paleontologists found fossils, looking again with fresh eyes. They may uncover bones that were once overlooked, or find new layers that were hidden beneath the soil. The earth changes over time as the wind and rain move the surface. A place that held little promise in the past may hold something new today. Scientists also explore areas where fossils have been suggested by other clues. In some places, unusual mineral patterns appear in the rock. In others, erosion reveals small fragments of bone or shell. These signs lead researchers to the places where the past still waits. They begin their excavations with patience, knowing that even a single tooth or scale can change the story of the ancient world. The potential for discovery reaches beyond the ground itself. The shape of the earth continues to change. Rivers carve through old rock. Storms reveal stone that has not seen the light in millions of years. As landscapes shift, new fossils come to the surface. They rest in the open for only a short time before they disappear again beneath the soil. Paleontologists search for these moments when the past becomes visible, if only for an instant. Each new discovery adds to the story of the ancient crocodiles. It reveals how they lived, how they grew, and how they shaped the world around them. It uncovers the balance of life near the rivers and the quiet power of predators that once waited beneath the surface. The story of these giants continues to unfold, carried forward by science and by the steady work of those who listen to the earth. There are still many questions to explore. Many riverbeds remain untouched. Many fossils lie hidden beneath the sand. The ancient world has not finished speaking. It whispers through the stone, waiting for the moment when its next secret will be revealed. As we reach the end of this quiet journey through the ancient rivers, one truth rises gently above all others. Life in the distant past was not shaped by strength alone. It was shaped by timing, instinct, and the fragile balance of luck. Every creature that lived along those Cretaceous waterways survived because it moved in rhythm with the world around it. The giant crocodiles were powerful, but they were also part of a larger story that included drought, flooding, shifting climates, and the unpredictable paths of other animals. We have followed these ancient predators through the world they once ruled, not a kingdom of dominance, but a landscape of cooperation and tension. Their success depended on the same forces that shaped dinosaurs, fish, turtles, and every life that approached the water's edge. They learned to wait in silence, to strike in perfect stillness, and to live with the changes brought by the river. It was not just their jaws or their size that made them powerful, it was their patience. It was the instinct to hold steady when the world shifted around them. The dinosaurs that walked beside those waters were not untouchable. Even the largest among them faced moments of vulnerability. They approached the river for survival. They crossed shifting channels and deep pools. They drank at the water's edge. In those moments, the balance of power changed. The river favored a different kind of strength. The crocodiles did not need to challenge dinosaurs on open ground. They only needed to wait for the right moment. Survival was never guaranteed, even for the mightiest creatures. This story reminds us that power in nature is never absolute. It moves like the current, changing shape as the landscape changes. The creatures that once dominated the forests did not always control the river. The ancient crocodiles relied on stealth and stillness. They hunted with patience. They endured the floods and droughts that shaped their world. They grew large because the rivers allowed it. They declined when the world no longer offered that same abundance. In every chapter of their story, we see the delicate relationship between life and its environment. As we look back across these ancient landscapes, we see how every moment of survival depended on the balance of many forces. A sudden flood might bring new prey, a drought might trap a predator in a shrinking pool, a change in the climate might open new hunting grounds or close old ones. The world was always shifting. The creatures that survived did so by listening to these changes, by trusting instinct, and by adapting to the rhythm of the land and water. Even now, traces of this ancient world remain. Modern crocodiles still carry the instincts of their ancestors. They wait beneath the water. They listen to the movement of the river. They sense when the world around them is changing. The story of the ancient giants lives on in their bodies and in the quiet stillness of the riverbanks we see today. As you reflect on this journey, consider which moment surprised you the most. Was it the power of floods that changed the land in an instant? Was it the moments when dinosaurs, so often pictured as invincible, found themselves vulnerable to hunters in the water? Was it the tiny fragments of bone and fossil that tell the story of creatures we may never see in their full form? Each discovery adds a new chapter to the story of our planet. Each fossil reminds us that the world we know today was shaped by countless lives long before us. If you have loved wandering through these ancient places and imagining the silent movements of the predators that watched from below, I would love to hear from you. Share your favorite moment or the part of the story that stayed with you. Your thoughts help guide future journeys into the deep history of our planet. And if you would like to continue exploring the mysteries of deep time and the quiet forces that shaped life on Earth, feel free to subscribe and stay with us. There are many more worlds to visit and many more stories waiting beneath the surface of stone and memory.